pull it up on my phone so I have a little
Realizing
chat window.
there might be echo because of my open back headphones that I'm wearing here. Cursed.
Should be fine. I doubt, like, what mic are you using? It's an RE20, right?
Yeah, it's an RE20.
Shouldn't be that sensitive.
Yeah, that's why I'm turning you guys down.
Great, thanks.
Does it mean he's not coming on then? We have to come up with some horrific accident. Does it mean he's not coming on? Oh, I'm getting echo now.
No, that was me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're good.
All right.
I just want to make sure I have a thing to see chat.
All right, so I think folks can hear us. Maybe folks can see us. As usual, chat, you guys are the producers of this show. So you let us know how the volume levels are. If anybody's clipping, beat them with chains, make sure that they are sufficiently shamed for their existence. And then we will endeavor to fix that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this is a midweek live stream. Normally we do this stuff on the weekends, but last weekend we were not able to. I had the COVID. Actually, to be clear, I went on vacation to Thailand, and then like the third day in, I got like horrific COVID because I went to this stupid. It was a Lunar New Year festival, so it was Lunar New Year, and so we're like, oh, we'll go check out the big festival they have. And it was just like a sea of humanity like I've never seen before. Like, it just endless throngs of people. And they're like people like right here, like for the whole thing. And then I was thinking to myself, there's no way that like, this wasn't disease being spread everywhere. And sure enough, I got, full blast COVID. So I've been suffering through that. And doing a bit better, but still pretty rough. As you guys can see, we have listener who is over here. He is rocking basically he's compensating for my lack of hair. So yeah, and then we also have Cameron, otherwise known as Golden Sound, here rocking the repping Silverstone. I'm assuming that is the British racetrack, or what is the?
It is.
Yeah.
It's the British F1.
Yeah. And so how are you guys doing on this fine Wednesday? I think it's Wednesday. What year is it?
I'm a little under the weather myself, although I don't think as anyone here as bad as you had it. I've just got mega dry sinuses, but otherwise fine.
Got it.
Right. Is listener quiet for you guys, or is everything good? How's
touch quiet, but not too bad.
All right, I was gonna make sure.
Is that any better?
That sounds a bit better.
Yep, that seems okay. So today, what are we going to talk about? We have a number of topics to talk about. The title of this stream is the FOTMification problem, or otherwise known as the flavor of the month.
What'd you call me?
Yeah, that's right. It's a play on, I suppose, enshittification, but the flavor of the month.
Andrew, people are saying you're a little bit louder than the other two.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can turn that. Well, it's just because I'm yelling. Okay, how about this? A little bit quieter.
That sounds good.
All right. So, listener's perfect. He's a perfect human. There you go. Listener's perfect.
That's so sweet. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
It's weird. It's weird not having Blaine here to act as a counterbalance to say no. Listener sucks.
Yeah. Where is he, by the way? Maybe he'll.
It's a good question.
Yeah. I think we actually had a different stream planned for the weekend, so maybe we'll have him on for the weekend and Joel as well. So yeah.
Yes, please.
He'd bring listener and Cameron up if I can do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Speaking of Joel, he has an idea about the volume.
I think you guys are gonna just need to turn yourselves up because
I don't know if I can, but if I just talk a little, hang on, there we go.
I'm maxed. I'm just bringing my microphone closer.
Yeah, that might do it. All right.
So we've got a fairly comprehensive list of stuff to talk about. Listen,
Yeah.
put some good stuff in the chat.
So I mean, let's just start from the top. So topic number one. I have a couple of other topics, but topic number one here: the FOTMification problem. And I suppose we could start this off, and I want to ask you guys: is this a problem? Well, first maybe we can talk about like what this is, just so we're all clear on what we're talking about, and then maybe we can go into is this a problem? And you know, how are things different now? I suppose compared to how they may have been even like 5 years ago.
Yeah, this stream was Cameron's idea.
Yeah.
So I think we should give him the reins for the
100% his fault.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, it's my fault, not my idea. But yeah, basically it's that it seems like in recent months and recent years, companies have been putting out products at a much faster pace, but not necessarily just putting out more products, but putting out products that aren't really all that different from whatever they already had. This is probably most prevalent in the IM space, but it exists across the whole thing as well. I mean, I put an example in our Discord chat, which is two models from SMSL, the DO200 and the SU8S, which, as far as I can tell from the website, the only difference between these two supposedly completely different products is that one of them has the screen on the left side of the volume knob and one of them has it in the middle. And that's it. Why do these need to be different products?
0.00001% difference in harmonic distortion.
And it's kind of affecting all sorts of things from, headphones and IEMs where there's a new sort of Harman-tuned IEM coming out every other week, and people are also sort of hyping them up and upgrading from whatever previous Harman-tuned IEM they had before to the new Harman-tuned IEM that is almost exactly the same. But also even in areas like, DACs and amplifiers, even amongst communities that, and I'm not necessarily diving into this discussion right now, but even amongst people who say that something is audibly transparent and doesn't sound any different to other stuff, they still go and buy a new thing because it's more recent and has 1 dB more SINAD, even if it's otherwise almost exactly the same product. Same DAC chip, same op amps, same power supply, same USB receiver, same everything. And yeah, the discussion is effectively, is this a bad thing? And also, why are companies doing this in the first place? Because clearly there must be a reason for it.
Yeah. So I want to also bring it to the headphone space a bit because, as I think you noted as well in some of our notes, that we see this with Hi-Fi Man headphones being released, a revision after revision after revision. We see this with, I obviously in the IEM space, like you mentioned. And I think if you kind of like zoom out a little bit as well, if you take kind of a look at, the headphone manufacturing runs in general and how that works, it's almost as if, even though everything is basically the same, and you could say from the manufacturing standpoint that, hey, this is the same headphone, we're just making another run of it, and it's just a revision, that it is to the benefit of the manufacturer to put a different label on that product, to tell a different story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good thing, I think, because there have been problems in the past with certain, the Audeze LCDX springs to mind, where it's got the same name, but depending on when you bought it or what year it was, it can be effectively a completely different headphone. And so in some situations, I imagine that certain headphone models aren't actually or weren't intended to be a new headphone, but just they did another batch or did another run or changed supplier or something, and it was not similar enough to say that it's the same product anymore. And I think that it's good that those get more clearly differentiated, but also when 5 different headphones which are extremely similar all come out within the space of months of each other, it's a bit frustrating, both as a consumer trying to work out what is ideal to buy, and also as a reviewer if you're reviewing something that is then outdated a week later.
So I'm of two minds on this, and I think in a similar vein, I think if the product is sufficiently different, in the case of the Audezes when they switched over from the memory foam stuff to the whatever they're using now, it's worth calling it something else, right? It's worth making that distinction. But I also think that that's different from, and maybe this is more of just a difference of degree and not a difference in kind, but you know, whatever the next hyped IEM comes out that's under whatever new wrapper brand that is essentially the same thing as like the myriad of IEMs that have come up before. And we can get into actually, I think, topic number 2 in a little bit, which is, you know, the collabs, and how that's sort of affecting things. But yeah, I mean, how do you guys let's tackle the Hi-Fi Man one, because I think that one's more interesting given just how similar all of their models, their recent releases tend to be. For the open back ones, obviously not the closed back ones. So, you know, you have the Ananda Stealth, the Ananda Nano. I think there's one other one in there somewhere. You have the Aria, the Aria Edition 2, the Aria Stealth, the Aria Organic. So there's 4 of those, and they're all basically the same except for some slight changes to the upper treble, right? Like that's basically it. And in some cases they're like, we could say, okay,
Aria Organic, I would say, is quite different. That's got a bit more prominent base. It's like more
the base
overall.
contour is different. That's right.
But Aria V1 and V2 were effectively identical, just slight changes to the build.
Yeah.
And even Stealth, whilst it was slightly different, was still really similar to the original Aria.
Now, I don't really have a strong
I think the main thing is just that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Should consumers be worrying about trying to keep up effectively? Because there's a lot of people who have a sort of, it's not necessarily just a flavor of the month thing, but a fear of missing out because they haven't got whatever the latest and greatest thing is. But you can only have the latest and greatest thing for 2-3 weeks at the moment.
So that's my issue, right? I would have a hard time recommending to someone to upgrade.
With the Hi-Fi Man thing, it's a little tough to say why some of those revisions have been made, because some of them are different drivers. Like you can see that clearly they have manufactured it differently. Other ones, it's a little unclear whether it was perhaps intended to be a new headphone in the first place, or if it just ended up different for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at other manufacturers,
do you have any thoughts on sort of? I guess the question that I'm most curious about is why are manufacturers producing so many products that are actually quite similar to each other? What's the benefit of it to them? Are they actually selling more?
Yeah, I assume
I can't
keeping
talking over.
The newness of product churning is generally a good thing for returns.
So, Golden's just got to fix his audio here. To put I suppose a slightly different perspective here as Golden fixes his audio. I can only really speak to like what I've overheard because I wasn't actually involved in this, but in conversations that Precog Vision had with Dunu and when they were working on their collab, they actually noted this as like an issue that if you're trying to come out with a product and you have certain goals for it beyond just the initial manufacturing run, it has to have staying power within the market. Right, it has to be something that is like consistently recognized, you know, over a certain amount of time. I think, like,
so
for
you
example,
think it's a case. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, you know, for example, the 64 Audio U12T is one that's been known for a long time. The Campfire Andromeda, like, you know, there are a number of those that are, you know, even to a certain extent, more recently the Audio Monarch Mark II, stuff that is, you know, Blessing to Dusk, stuff that is. They're staples within the market. They exist and they stay there. This is very different from the SimGot EM6L or the, you know, like that's not say they're bad products, right? It's just, it's like they're not they don't need to be these things that exist in the market for, you know, years on end. They can exist for several months and then we can move on to something else.
What's interesting is that it seems like I think you're right that a lot of IEM brands, manufacturers, whatever you want to call them, are hoping that it hits and stays, and if it doesn't stay, they'll move on. What's interesting is that over the last few years in headphones, we've kind of seen the opposite, where a lot of the like either flagships or things that like do have a lot of staying power, like for example the original Focal Clear or the original Focal Utopia or the Odyssey LCD4 are all getting revisions and not necessarily for the better. But for IEMs, I think it's pretty clear that what's happening is they're just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall, nothing's sticking, so they have to do it again and just keep
I
iterating and iterating and iterating.
Is it because nothing's sticking, or is it because
I mean, I
they're?
think it's pretty clear nothing is sticking, right?
I don't know. I don't know how much. Oh, you mean like as far as the staying power within the market is concerned?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Like
yeah. Okay.
I don't think we've seen anything with staying power
Pardon me.
or consistency of recommendation since probably like Truthier Red or Hola, but Hola is discontinued now.
Hmm. And even that's an example, right? I don't know.
Well, the Hola got discontinued for a reason nobody really knows. Um, but
Okay.
yeah,
I I was thinking that I mean even those are still somewhat recent, right? Like we're
yeah,
talking like
2023.
yeah. So like even those we'll see what their staying power is. You know, like we're so far removed from the frickin' HD 650s of the world, you know, like that's people aren't trying to do that anymore. Now you have companies coming up like well there's the FIO FT5 thing, which is like that's not going to have staying power, like guaranteed that's not going to have staying power. The gold
I feel
planar
like you were
stuff.
so much more surprised about that one than I
Oh my
was.
god, I was like I was hopeful cuz like people were saying it was good and stuff and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be good." And then no, it's bad. And it's like there are another one is the Theaudio Wraith, right? Like these are not headphones that are going to exist in the market 5 years from now because it's nobody's going to want to buy them because they suck.
Yeah,
And you know, so it's like just stuff that gets kind of pumped out. Um and you can tell a nice marketing story around it. I think this is easier to do with IEMs. You can reignite sort of the marketing engine behind various different products and get people hyped and excited about them. Um, and whether it's like I want to say when I was doing the backlog series, I want to say I did like 5 different IMs at different price points that were all basically the same.
mm,
And it's like all right, like this really is the shotgun approach, right? Like yeah, with similar tunings, like shotgun in terms of
yeah.
like okay, let's tell this driver story or let's tell this driver story. Or let's put this waifu in the box. Let's see what works. Let's see what kind of hype we can get. And so yeah, I mean like that's kind of where to me it's like I do long for the days of, you know, uh even something like, for all of its faults, LCD2s, like that's something
Yeah.
that still exists, it's still recognized, it's still kind of like okay, it's a thing that occupies a space on the shelf.
Yeah, it's
And
not perfect, but it's solid. And does what it says on the tin.
I'm not gonna say it can't be improved, right? But it's like
Yeah, of
it's
course.
recognized and well known, and has
Mhm.
been that name, even though it's gone through various different iterations over the years and different runs. Uh, the it's I mean, how many years now have we had that? I mean, I want to say like 15 years almost.
Do you think there's a
I
particular
feel like
reason as to why it seems anyway that at the sort of higher end of the market, this effect is seen less? I mean, like the Sysvara, for example. How many years has that been out now?
oh,
Uh,
uh,
Less obviously. That's
yeah.
2018, 20,
Yeah. So
something.
almost a decade and hasn't been
I
Yeah.
could be wrong about
replaced
that.
yet.
I don't know
If
if it's
anything, I think we just saw the first like big shift in that when like Utopia got revised and LCD5 came out and like but that was probably the first like big time
hmm
that that whole class of product had been refreshed. Though it's interesting when it comes to flagship IEMs, it's actually the same as the budget market where like if you're looking at like the super high tier um like unique melody
I was going to
stuff.
say Unique Melody. They
Yeah, yeah,
keep
yeah.
coming out with new ones, and every single time there's an extra either $1,000 or just a straight up zero added to the end of the
Isn't there
price
one
point.
that they have that's like
Yeah.
9,000 or something like that?
I think it's over 10K now, isn't it?
That's
The
absurd.
newest
I
one.
couldn't be surprised. Every time you ask, we add another zero.
It's
Yeah.
absurd.
I mean, I like the Mest, but that went 0 to 100 real quick.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's also that there's no coherent. It's kind of the opposite in in the low end, where like it seems they're all aiming for something similar. At the flagship prices, it's basically anything goes. People are
Esoterica
tuning.
Hmm.
to the max. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're tuning pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Some people like it.
Where's the sweet spot in your mind?
Just in general, or for
Like,
IEMs?
well, yeah. Well, let's say for IEMs, because like, okay, the reason I mention this is that like people are spending absurd amounts of money on these audio products with the false notion that the more money they put into something, the better it could potentially be, right? Like, and with IEMs,
So you're asking, where does diminishing returns start to hit hardest?
not even that. Like, I would say like there's a cadence of like things go up and get better and better, and then like fall off a fucking cliff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that like there's diminishing returns necessarily. It's that like you suddenly get into an area where it's like things are just like bizarre, right? Like, there's some things that are solid, but as you were just saying, like, more often than not, a higher end product is more weird, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think for all markets, that point is probably comfortably under $1,000.
Yeah. And
Like,
it's not to say that there aren't good products above that. There are. But
no, but when you start to see that nadir and that drop
yeah,
off
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
a little tough.
the Storm. I absolutely adore that IEM, and it is unfortunately phenomenally expensive.
It
But
is
then you
very
try some other
solid.
stuff like the is it the Bravo CU or Ra? I think it was.
Raw
And it's like
CU
this
or
is.
CCU.
I think that was $10,000,
Oh,
and it
Jesus.
was the weirdest, most terrible thing. Uh, I'm sure that there's some particular person who specifically wants that exact sound signature and is happy to pay that much for it, but I can't quite understand how there's going to be a sizable number of people who try it and go, "Oh, that sounds fantastic. That's what I want."
Well, in a
Because
certain
it's
extent, though, those are science experiments where it's like, hey, let's
Hmm.
see what happens with your music when you make the sound do this, and it's like some bonkers FR,
I
and
mean, I think that's how a lot of people, think about it. Like on as consumers, they're
yeah,
like, yeah, I want to put my IEM through this weird filter and see what happens.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it does seem fun as long as like you can like listen to it without wincing.
But I mean, that's straying a little bit from the FOTMification problem. I was gonna say
Yeah.
the only other thing I really have on this topic is it seems like on the one hand, you have the flavor of the month when it comes to the tunings that they're going after, and so it's like, okay, there's a new, whatever that's hyped up. For a while it was the Nova, then it was the EM6L, like that kind of thing, and that's all kind of centered around the tuning. It's all basically the same or very similar. Um, Giz Audio chop in, right? The binary chop in, right? It's all the Kiwi Ears Quintet, like they're all very similar. However, I've also seen it in terms of driver type and driver story. And I don't know if you've seen this, but like planar IEMs were all the rage for a while, and every
Yeah,
manufacturer was coming out with, trying to
in
hit that.
2022, it was just all planar
Yeah,
IEMs. Like April, Crin put out the timeless video, and then it
yeah.
was just planar
Planars
IEMs for the
all, yeah,
rest of the
exactly.
year.
Yeah, and oftentimes they were really bad. It's just you gotta have something on the
Yeah, what's
market.
especially interesting about all of that is that whole thing happened, and it's like after that year, the timeless was still the one that people were recommending as
Yeah,
the best planar
it is
IEM
still
because
the
like
best
in
one.
all
Yeah,
that time, brands weren't trying to improve on it. At least from my perspective, it just seemed like they were just throwing the driver everyone wanted into an IEM
yeah.
so they could capitalize on the
I
hype.
I will say there were some that were okay. Like I thought that Wrapped Go Hook thing was all right, but it was open back,
Yeah,
which was weird.
that one clearly took a different approach,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then what was another one that was? I think there was
I mean,
one.
the S12 got a lot of
S12 was
traction
alright.
because it was inexpensive, and I think it was tuned a little bit more intensely. So people who did want the whole tech of the planar driver were getting a little bit more for it.
I mean, at that point, I think just get the timeless. It's better.
Many people said this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah, like that's basically all I really have to say on the flavor of the month thing, because it's like you can have that in any number of ways, and I think we've seen a number of them. Both when it comes to measured performance type, sound signature type, but also driver story. I'm sure there's other things that I'm not thinking about, but like, it's is it a problem? I don't know. What
That's
do you?
the thing. So Blaine actually posted in the chat because
Cursed.
he desperately wants me to look at chat. That he was saying that it's possibly a good thing because it keeps money in the dev team's budget and doesn't allow brands to rest on their laurels. I'm paraphrasing, but
I don't necessarily know that that's true, because I don't know if we've
trying to
actually
find
got
his
any
name.
sort of real evidence that it's net generating more revenue for any particular company than just having a single good product
That
versus
you just
having
keep producing.
yeah,
Yeah.
5 different versions of effectively the same thing that you re-release. And actually, for me, there's been certain products and stuff which I've avoided buying or even just avoided reviewing because it's tiring. Like if a company there's certain companies who used to put out products quite infrequently, and when they were done, they were good. They were a meaningfully different product from what they had before. Often had quite exciting new features. iFi's a good example of this. They used to have a much slimmer lineup and didn't release products very often, whereas now I'm hesitant to review certain devices from iFi because I know that there's going to be another one in 3 months' time, which will be almost the same, and people will just be going, "Well, but is this one better than the new one that you reviewed? Are you going to test the new one?" It's like, I feel like actually there's a case to be made that certain companies might make more if they didn't adopt this strategy.
Yeah, I kind of think that there is, while I get Blaine's point, I think there is a meaningful downside to the consumer because people are taken in by this. Like I saw this with the, I know that the Hi-Fi Man Aria Organic is not just that it's more treble than the previous ones. It's also slightly contoured in the bass. But like, if you look at it, if you basically take the broad strokes of it, it's the
It's an Aria.
same. It's an Aria, right? Like they're very similar. And but because of the whole organic designation and then whatever they did with the new driver story and all this stuff, it generated interest in a way that had a lot of people upgrading from their previous Arias, right? Because people are thinking that this is like, oh, well, it's like now the best of all of them, right? And I feel like it's the same problem that you run into with people buying, the slightly more imperceptibly, transparent source because it scores better on Synad. And then you have a whole bunch of people wasting money when they could be getting something that might better suit their preferences or just getting something different with that same amount of money. I just feel like it's the flavor of the monthification in terms of sound signature ends up being a detriment to the community as a whole because people get sucked in by, the hype for a given thing. And then,
Yeah, I mean it's also just that it makes the market less varied, which is a problem. It's, in my opinion, especially a problem in headphones recently. It feels like everyone's kind of going for the Hi-Fi Man signature. Is that weird to say?
No,
Like
I think
which
a lot
ones?
more people are.
I feel like I feel like every time I go to our measurement host database thing,
Oh yeah.
and look at a new headphone that you or DMS have measured, it always looks exactly the same. It's like well extended bass with a little bit extra low mid, 2K scoop, too much treble. Like Composer, this headphone,
Oh
the
yeah.
490 Pro, Tungsten,
Yeah.
Empyrean
Well,
2,
Tungsten
like, everything that's come out
I will
looks
say though,
exactly the same.
Tungsten and Empyrean 2 are different enough from Hi-Fi Man's sound signature.
Yeah.
They
I
are
haven't heard them. Actually, I haven't heard the double-sided
Tungsten with the
which is
hybrid
one I
pads
want.
it's like an HE6 but warmer basically.
It's like an HE6 with Sundara pads,
Yeah, of course.
which
Not
is what
the
you're comparing it to.
not the default
Which
HE6.
I think a lot of the Hi-Fi Man same face syndrome is down to the fact that they've found like a pad that works for them. Like if you put an old HE6, like the $2 really uncomfortable velour HE6
Yeah.
pad on a current gen Hi-Fi Man, looks a lot like an HE6. The mids come back up and you
Okay.
get more
You get the
low
honk.
treble and
Yeah.
like 10K. Yeah, you
Yeah.
get more of the honk, exactly. So I think they're just kind of slightly tweaking magnet and diaphragm parameters and just keeping pads and coupling mechanics the
Yeah.
same.
I think it's good that, generally speaking, the market is shifting towards, I think, broadly better sound signatures overall. There's a lot less complete rubbish at lower prices, which is good. It is also becoming less varied, though. And
Yeah.
I think that, to some degree, esoterica is a good thing. We don't want everything to sound exactly the same. 1266 is a good example. It's not a normal or neutral sounding headphone. It's not transparent in any way, but I like it, and a lot of people like it because it's really weird and just kind of works in certain ways. And it would be a shame if those kind of things didn't exist because Abyss was also trying to get a Hyperman sort of sound signature. But then again, Abyss also hasn't released a new product every 5 minutes. They've got a few releases, to be honest, but I would say that actually their ones have been.
But don't they have like
different
4
in
versions of the
3G.
Diana that have come out in the last like 2 years?
No, they've had what, TC and MR.
Two, TC and MR.
Oh, 2. Okay.
Yeah, both of which are very different.
I was gonna say I don't know that I quite shared the opinion on esoterica for things
good?
like. Well, yeah, like I get what you're saying, like Golden, and there is a sense in which I think that that's true because you don't want everything to point just like. We know there are different preference groups, like people have different preferences, and it's worth satisfying different preferences. Not everything needs to be the same, right? But at the same time, I don't like whenever I go to audio shows, and this is more of like an analogy, but like, do you ever go to like the speaker sections, and like there's speakers that have like the crazy horn loaded stuff, and they all sound awful. Like
I've yet
truly
to hear a set
awful.
of horns that I actually like.
Okay, yeah,
I've still
like
not heard a single one.
I to me that's the downside of esoterica, where it's like, or you have I'm trying to think of an example in headphones. In IEMs, it's like, I mean, just about everything Campfire Audio releases in the last, however, since the Andromeda, right? Let's just release something with a crazy tuning, and maybe somebody will like it, right? And to not try and aim strictly at the same sound signature over and over again. And like there's a sense in which, okay, sure, like I appreciate that they're trying to do something different, but at the same time it's like there are things that exist that nobody is going to like, if that makes sense. Like I don't think, like, we talk about sound is that there's a subjective component to sound, but it's like it's not this is a phrase from listener, but it's not a free lunch, right? Like there things need to resemble an ear transfer function of some kind in order to be a good product.
Yeah. You're going to struggle to find someone who likes something with just a massive peak at 7K or something, for example.
Yeah,
I mean, I
or okay, like the flip side, right? Like no ear gain is probably something that most people don't like zero ear gain. Like there are going to be,
I don't
I've seen people that do like that.
There is I agree,
which is a good example.
There is the Metal 571 contingent, and shout
or
outs to
the
Metal
Yamaha
571
headphone that just came out that even
okay, the Yamaha
I don't want to throw him under
though,
the bus, but even Jude likes.
Jude likes it?
With suede pads, he enjoys the YH5K. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it was better with the suede pads, but I
didn't hear it, so I couldn't comment on it. But
I mean, because there's to some degree, I think, a bit of an effect of, and this is something which so I'll try not to go on too much of a tangent, but there is to some degree a bit of an effect of people discussing something online and getting hyped up and talked about and stuff, and people buying that thing and then recommending that thing to other people, despite the fact that they've never tried any alternatives. And
yeah.
That, I mean, there's certain other products like the Focusrite Scarlett interfaces, a product which
that is a good take. Actually,
so annoyed about this because they've had some serious problems which they've just not fixed over 3 generations, and everyone just recommends them because
4 generations.
4 now. But I mean, yeah, it's that's something which I think is a problem, and I think maybe this is playing into that a little bit. If there's something new and you never give people enough time to actually kind of generate negative feedback about it and effectively only leave the hype and potential optimism, maybe that's a net positive effect for the manufacturer. I'm not sure.
So, I mean, there's 2 things with that. Like, I'm glad you mentioned the Focusrite stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
Bayer Dynamic DT990 and 1990 are exactly
and
that.
M50X.
M50X, yeah,
I
it's
mean,
like
one could argue with the Bayers that the Pro X series, it seems they did try to address people's complaints.
yes, but they introduced other issues with those headphones that it makes
You're not going to
it's
get
like
any disagreement
they're
from me on that.
worse. Like, yeah. But yeah, like, I mean, the manufacturer, addressing that is one thing, but I think the other side of it is, yeah, like Cameron was saying, like the community basically running untethered to, I mean, this gets a little bit to the, like, forums are basically support groups for product owners thing.
Yeah, for product owners who haven't owned many other or any other products.
Well, but also
Cameron
it's
said.
like it's the copium treadmill, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I was dealing with that even just the other day on Headfi, where someone was like, these guys haven't reviewed the Neumann NDH30 because if they did, and if they were being honest about it, they would realize that it would basically kill their entire, like, reason to review anything or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing.
Is this the
right?
one that's really dark and has a massive mid bass hump?
The NDH30?
Yeah.
I don't.
It is very dark.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an HD 560s under 1K though.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just remember, like, the thing is, we didn't review it because we heard it at a show and we're like, like, it didn't do anything that I was like, this is something
It
I
is
need
too
to get
dark
in.
even for me.
Yeah, but the idea, like, these crazy conspiracy theories came up on these forums because people couldn't fathom the idea that somebody else had a different context for what good was, and
Was it specifically pertaining to the NDH30?
yeah, it was specifically that one.
That's so funny to me. I have had that same group of Head 5 people on my ass for reviewing that thing negatively. They're a devoted bunch. I'll give it to them.
Yeah. But, like, this is, you get those sort of echo chambers, right? Where it's like, and I saw the same thing to a certain extent with the Composer, where, me saying it's not quite as good as the HD800S, right? I don't know if you, like, whether or not you agree with that, that was just sort of my opinion. I still thought it was good in a number of ways, right? But the fact that I didn't find it as good as the HD800S was like sacrilege to that group. Because of the echo chamber that it sort of built up it's like an inertia, right? Like of building up the hype around that. And we've seen that, with the products that exist in the market for a very long time, including the LCD2s, including the DT1990 Pros, to a certain extent, the HD600s, right? Like, there's the community that's built around that. The difference is that those are actually good headphones.
Yeah, there is a tendency to group around that headphone, but for good reason.
Yeah. Anyways, that's topic number one. I don't know if you guys have any additional thoughts on that, but I have a whole bunch more topics to get into. If you guys want to move on
To the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I'm good.
Topic number 2, the collab issue, collabs in general. This is sort of a jumping off point from the FOTMification problem, but Critical was recently under fire for saying, "Oh, the SimGot lineup, apart from the EM6L, is mid," and he was under fire because it coincided with. I'm not sure if he leaked this or somebody put this out
Pretty
there.
sure it was Lin Sol.
Yes, somebody basically put out that I think there's a Kiwi Ears collab.
Yes.
Which is
Kiwi Ears
freaking
Singolo.
great, by the way. Kiwi Ears, a company, like one of those sort of Linsol companies or Linsol umbrella companies that has produced a lot of good IEMs, I would say. Also, the person who has tuned, I know a listener is in disagreement here, but I know the person who's tuned a lot of them, and I know they have a lot of expertise. Like, they actually are doing things very intelligently. But like you can see what they're doing with the various different products in their lineup. It's interesting. They obviously have their Harman one, but then they have the Kiwi Ears Orchestra and the Orchestra Lite, both of which I thought were, different. Like, meaningfully different from the norm, the typical stuff we see. And I don't know if I would say it's universally better, but like certainly more interesting to me.
Yeah, if we're talking about like the good esoterica, like
Yeah.
those are good examples where they're
Yeah.
meaningfully different, but people might actually like them, and they're not crazy expensive either.
I would say
So,
the same thing about like the Dunu SA6, right? Like it's not
well, that thing
normal.
was loved. That thing is like,
Yeah, but I think it's great,
yeah,
right? It's I mean,
yeah. If anything, I thought the Orchestra Light was like kind of a continuation of that
yeah.
sort of signature more than the
The
SA6 Mark II
Oh
was.
god, the SA6 Mark II was not good. That it's disappointing. But the SA6 Ultra was good. The Zeos collab, I thought. Anyway,
Yeah, but not many people have it.
yeah. Um, but so I guess to get back to the collab question, how do you guys feel about collabs? And like, I suppose how do you feel about the collabs, but also how do you feel about the anti-collab sentiment that has the volume sort of been turned up on that lately? As a
You want to
result
go
of
first,
some of
Ken?
this?
I was going to say, just before we start this, I should say that I've got a collaboration product coming out at CanJam New York, so should probably say that before, just for full transparency. My thoughts on collabs are kind of twofold. The first thing is that I think that there are things that people should be annoyed at that they aren't, that are much worse than collabs, namely affiliate links, where regardless of if you have any direct involvement with the product, you are getting paid when people buy it based on what you say. That's just as much, if not more, of a problem than a collab. And also things like reviewers getting to keep and then selling review units, that kind of thing, just getting paid straight up by the manufacturer for the review, effectively.
Right.
I think that collabs, obviously, it has to be handled carefully. There are going to be people who will do a collab and it will influence what they say. It will influence what they say about either that manufacturer's products or competing products. And there's no real way to be sure if that's the case for someone. You kind of just have to figure out for yourself if you trust them or not based on everything else that they've put out. But I also think that collabs can have a genuinely positive impact on the industry. I think it's fair to say that Clinical has had a significant positive impact on the IEM market. I think that, regardless of where you stand in terms of the ethical concern, that's kind of just a fact. And that's something which sort of should be weighed in as well. Personally, I think that there's no way to get around the fact that there is a slight moral issue there. You've now got a financial relationship with a manufacturer.
Well,
despite the fact
in
that you're a
situations
reviewer.
where there is a financial component to the collab.
Yes, which there might not always be.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
that's there. And I think that it's simple explanation for me is my collabs with Ferrum. I'm going to be sort of as transparent about it as possible. I'm not going to try and pretend that there is absolutely no issue there, because there is. I now have a financial relationship with a manufacturer, and I think the best way to handle it is be as transparent about it as you possibly can, and sort of prove your integrity through other means. Let your sort of reputation and how you've handled yourself previously and in future stand as evidence for that. And I think Crin's done a good job of that, to be fair. So I still trust Crin despite the fact that he's done tons and tons of collabs. I can't necessarily say the same about other reviewers who I've seen an influence from other financial relationships with a manufacturer that doesn't get quite as much backlash.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I want to say two things. So if you want to go first, that's probably
Okay.
better.
I was just gonna say with the collabs, I think that they've become sort of like a dirty word, or like there's a negative sentiment attached to the term collab. But the reality is that like not all collabs are done the same way, and they don't always have the same relationship. And I saw there was a thread on Reddit recently about how like someone was saying like how someone's trying to give an explanation for how collabs work, right? And they gave basically the narrowest, version of that, which is to say that it's like, okay, in maybe even in the majority of cases, it's like the manufacturer has a product already, and they basically do what is necessary for you to slap your name on that product to give it some sort of interest or hype, right, in the market. It's a stamp of approval process. It's a marketing tactic, essentially.
Sure.
And there are absolutely collabs where that's the case. I'm going to call out Zeos for this with the SA6 Ultra. But the thing is, that was still a great product, right? All he did was boost the bass. Wait, am I thinking of the SA6 Ultra or the
No, I think
the
you're
Z12?
thinking of his,
The Z12.
yeah, the Z12.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
That was
Sorry,
the one.
Z12. Yeah. So the fact that occurs, right, is maybe there's something there where it's like, okay, this has become a little bit too commonplace to the point where anything special about the fact that it's a collab is diminished. I think that's a fairly reasonable thing to say. At the same time, we are better for it as a community if those products are meaningfully improved as a result of whoever is doing the collab, whether it's Zeos, whether it's Kryn, whether it's, you know, Giz Audio. Like, to me, it's like, if the end result is that we end up with a better product than we would have otherwise, I have no issues. The other side of it too is that, like I was mentioning, there are many other ways in which collabs get done that don't, like, for example, Precog Vision's collab was not at all like the typical route that people go through to do collabs. His collab was very much a sort of, you know, trial and error process over like a year to develop that thing. And so he worked very closely with Dunu to do that. And to the point where, like, the initial concept even changed completely, right? So, like, they you know, they had an original idea and the end result was very different from what that original idea. So yeah, so that's kind of my sort of 2 cents on it, that, like, not all collabs are done the same. And number two, that, you know, if the end result is that the community is better for it because we have better products, then great. But there is also absolutely a dark side to this.
I think that bit there, that if we end up with a better product, is the key thing. Because, I mean, I could say, I think, in my initial reaction is that if there's sort of more work that's gone into something, it's not just putting a name on something. You know, you genuinely, like the Precog one, or you know, like my upcoming collab, it's been in the works for a while. We've put a lot of work into development for that. But at the same time, even with like Zeus's Z12, you could say, well, all he's done is boost the bass. But if it's still a better product and the manufacturer hadn't done it themselves already, then it's still a better product and we're better off for it. It doesn't necessarily need to be something that's complicated. And even some of Kryn's collabs, it's stuff which the manufacturer could have done themselves, but they didn't. And even if what his input was really minimal or really simple, if it still just needed that nudge to get towards a better product, we are still better off for it.
All right, Blaine is saying y'all sleeping on the real truth about collabs, and I'm being silenced from revealing it. Well, reveal it. What's
that?
Yeah.
Reveal it to chat, Blaine.
Yeah, reveal it to chat.
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of the criticism about Kryn in this particular instance and collabs in general has to do with the implicit bias that comes with it, or the conflict of interest, whatever you want to call it. The fact is, reviewers, before they ever get in contact with a brand to do some collabs, they're already not doing as much as they can to avoid bias. Like, I think all of us acknowledge that we could be a lot better about avoiding bias in our process, and to an extent, this entire thing we're doing is biased. So when you get on a reviewer for being biased, it's a totally fair complaint to make, but you got to draw the line somewhere. And I feel like with Kryn, it becomes explicit to me that I don't so much care as a consumer of audio products about, like, monetary relationships or anything, as long as, like, I get a sense that the person is being honest. And this is completely personal to me. You don't have to agree. But Kryn could basically collab with anyone, and I would still trust him because I know him. But, like, other people who don't do collabs but do reviews for, I don't want to name any names, but any random brand, and it's a positive review, that to me is a lot more suspicious. And maybe it's because my position is biased as well. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel
Is it
like there
possible
are,
to eliminate bias entirely?
Well,
But as you said,
I
it's
have
definitely
to.
as a reviewer,
I have to
Yeah.
reference something that DMS has
tough.
said a long time ago, which is that the entire project of reviewing, I'm paraphrasing again here, but like the process of it for anybody is just is always going to include some kind of bias, and the community just needs to decide what they care about. And the wind
Yeah.
can blow in different directions on that, right? Like you don't always know, what the bias the community is going to care about, 1 month or the next month. But right now, obviously, it seems that collabs are under fire, and that seems to be the one that they care about. But it's like to get back to Cameron's point about affiliate links and some of the other practices that people have. It's like there are other biases that people completely ignore, that they don't really even think about, or like relationship, when manufacturers have relationships with the reviewers or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a valid thing to not want to see happen. I
Yeah.
understand people who have issues with that. Or like to an extent, it's a smaller subgroup, but the people who would like get on, my back or your back, Andrew, about not doing like a blind A/B test between things. Uh, like obviously, there's only so much we can do as individuals at
Well,
home,
to be
but
clear,
to them, that's a huge issue,
to be clear though,
and that's
I
fair.
do blind A/B tests.
How can you do that if you have to
Oh, I thought
swap
you
the
meant
head?
like with because I have a ABX tester
Oh
for
no, I
but
didn't. I
but
didn't.
for
No, I didn't
headphones.
mean for like amps and DACs and
Oh,
stuff. Because I don't think either of us review those, and it's why
I
I
don't.
didn't
Yeah,
mention Cameron, because Cameron I know does
yeah,
do that stuff.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, like as much as we would want to do a blind A/B between two different things, one, like how are you going to do that when ergonomics and feel exist?
Yeah, you can't eliminate the
Yeah,
weight, right? For example.
and two, I think both of us already mostly no, probably all the way subscribe to the idea that if the FR at the blocked canal were the same, which is the way we would be able to simulate one headphone.
Mm.
Um,
Well, okay. If you had an HD 800S, then you could,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean,
Which I do. That's the reason I have one. It's just that it was a return,
just
and
to
it
do
was like,
that.
yeah. I mean, it's not
Yeah,
like I want to listen to it.
yeah. All this was just to say that like none of our processes are free from bias, even if we are doing blind A/B testing. So
Mhm.
as DMS said, you just got to choose what you're comfortable with. The other part of it that I think Kryn was under fire for was the fact that he had given a negative impression of a brand or of a product group that would be seen as his competitors.
Competition. Yeah. Yeah.
And really, the question there for me is if you think he would have said something different if he didn't have a collab. I don't think he would have.
No,
I
he wouldn't.
absolutely think he would have said the exact same thing. And not
Yeah.
because he has a collab in the works, because people have been bothering him for months to review the SimGot stuff and he's annoyed.
Yeah. But this is also why, if I were to do a collab, I wouldn't want to have any monetary, I wouldn't want to get royalties out of it, because
Same for
like,
me.
because it's like
Yeah.
at that point, like you are basically what's the term, mortgaging your credibility. That's probably not the right phrasing, but you get the idea, right? It's like
Yeah,
and
I
it's not
think.
worth the headache, I think,
Yeah, I mean, well, the worth is going to be subjectively chosen. Like, it really depends on how much you're getting paid and who you are, I
I
guess. But
guess, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
to
If you
me,
make if you make the thing that like everybody buys, then you don't need to be a reviewer anymore. But
I think the other angle is, sort of with a collab, the intention is that you are helping to make something which is good for consumers, and
yes,
there's good and bad collabs in that regard. Like I've turned down collabs actually from a couple of companies, like one of them who wanted to do a collab with me, and it probably would have been quite lucrative if I did it, but they literally just wanted to basically make a different color version of something. They didn't want to actually, change or develop any new features or anything, and so it wasn't going to be beneficial to anyone. It would literally just be selling integrity. And so I turned that down. Whereas the one that I've got coming up, there's been a lot of work put into something which isn't available on any other products, and I think is genuinely an improvement. and with Kryn and Zeos' collabs and that kind of stuff, not everyone's going to agree based on subjective preference and stuff, but the idea is that they are working to provide something which is not otherwise available and wouldn't otherwise be available. And so yeah, I think the end goal is to provide something which is actually good for the community at large. And there is no way to eliminate bias entirely. You kind of just have to work out if you want to trust a reviewer based on how they've behaved and how they handle themselves in other ways. I think anyone who tells you that there isn't a problem either isn't thinking about it properly, or there is a problem and they're trying to hide it.
Yeah.
I think you just have to be honest that, yeah, there's some bias there. It can't be avoided, but the idea is that the end result is still a net positive.
Yeah. I was thinking about this. Even if, so like in my case, if I were to do a collab, I wouldn't want to get paid for it, essentially. But even then, there would be bias given that I would release a product that I would like.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's a thing.
No, there is truly bias no matter what you do.
No matter what you do.
Yeah.
And if it's successful, it's like, oh, I could do this again with something else, But so there's always that. I'm just going to read from Blaine here. He says collabs are neutral for consumers, good for reviewers, and bad for brands. Literally, they're a way for reviewers to get a chunk of the money. And then following that, if they spent half what collabs net cost on propagating review units, brands would win big versus collabs. But there's that I disagree with that. I think that's
I don't necessarily like if we're talking about a big win monetarily. I think if they sent more units to just random Headfire reviewers, they'd probably get more positive press. Like to an extent, I think that might have been what happened with SimGot over the past year.
But this assumes that they would be
a lot of people and didn't collab with anyone.
Okay, but this gets us to what's going to be topic number 3 here. But like oftentimes, and we know this is true, manufacturers don't know what to shoot for, and that's where the collab is useful. I think. Yeah. Now, that's not to say that it's always done well.
I think it's also important to frame that they don't know what to shoot for in terms of they don't know what the community they're looking to serve is looking for at that current moment. Like it's less so about like something being objectively right and better for them to shoot for as much as it is they don't necessarily know what the demand.
There's a reason why companies hire consultants rather than just spending more money on marketing.
I don't think they even care what good is. They just want to sell products.
Right. So, that's why I'm saying it's about what people want.
Yeah. So if they can basically have what they believe is a safe bet in terms of what people want, and that is, let's say the dance is being led on that by a given personality with a certain amount of influence, like Chronicle, for example, then, they can feel comfortable and confident, working with him on a collab. And I think that they would rather do that than try and, think about all the like absolute fucking crazy brainworm shit that you have to read through, to get any sense of what people want if you were to try to read through like Headfi. You know what I mean? Like you would not get a net better product if you just took all the feedback from people on Headfi. Whereas if you would, basically say, okay, well, this person has a certain amount of clout and has a certain style of tuning that they enjoy, and other people, reliably enjoy that too, it's easier for them. So that's why I say I don't know that I agree that, sending it out to more people to get feedback is equal to collabing with a given, partner.
I think sending more units out to be reviewed by reviewers or people on Headfire or whatever, only works if your product's actually good. For the most part. There's always going to be some people who will just say that it's the best thing since sliced bread, even if it is terrible. But for the most part, spending more on advertising has better returns when your product is good. The point is to tell people about how good it is. But if that's not necessarily the case, or you just don't know what you have the ability to make something good, but you don't quite know what good is or what the market wants, it's cheaper for you to pay a few % to someone to collab with them and get input from them as a sort of consultant to push the design in the right direction, rather than either spend a ton of money developing a product which ends up being a flop, or spending a ton of money on study groups and whatever trying to get independently a product that ends up in the right direction. Brands wouldn't do it if it didn't make financial sense to them, right? There's a reason that they do it.
Yeah, I think Blaine. So like I get what you're saying, Blaine, as well, but I do think that it misses the point about the product actually getting better as a result. I don't think that it's as safe a bet that the products would get to listeners.
Yeah,
point,
I don't think
to
he's
be a better
arguing
fit.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just saying the brands would make more money.
Yeah, it's
which
true.
They
it's
would.
True. It's true.
They would.
Yeah.
No, I'm not assuming perfect information. That's the whole point. The point is that brands don't have perfect information, and often doing a collab is a way to get better information and make a product which isn't just going to sell better because it has someone's name associated with it, but because it will genuinely be a product that is more desirable to people.
In the cases where those
there.
people, those collaborators are actually up on what good is, for the segment that they're trying to have a good fit with.
Yeah, which won't always be the case.
Won't always be the case, yeah.
I think by and large it probably will be.
Yeah. So this gets to the next question, or next topic. So that, or at least that I have on my list, which is, I mean, I'd sort of frame this slightly differently, but I was thinking, do manufacturers know what to shoot for?
Does he know?
Well, okay. So the reason why I bring this up, there were some products that actually a few of us were reviewing. We can't talk about it yet. That it's clear that the manufacturer has something in mind, right? But they've kind of missed the mark on the minutia, let's just say. And so it kind of like to me, and I think to other people who were also evaluating this, it sparked the question of like, well, some manufacturers clearly shoot for, something we might say safe. And then other manufacturers shoot for something else that is, you can see what they're doing, but it's very different. And I suppose the question would be, what do we think about the differences in terms of what manufacturers shoot for in both IEMs and over-ear headphones? And is there a scenario where, so like I guess the supervening question here is, do manufacturers know better than reviewers?
I think, I mean, yes and no. Kind of depends on what you're talking about. There's obviously manufacturers know more than reviewers in a lot of areas in terms of the actual engineering and what it takes to achieve certain results. It's easy for a reviewer to say, oh, this treble spike shouldn't be there. It's a bit harder to actually fix that problem. But then there are also cases where manufacturers put stuff out and you go, who greenlit this? Who said that this was okay to release? Like,
Yeah.
Why are you wasting money shipping these anywhere? And okay, I mean, Hyperman's an example of a company which seems to have, in their open backs in particular, found a target and sort of knows how to get a result that works very well for a lot of people. They're seeing a lot of success, and I think rightly so. I mean, the Susvara is still one of my very favorite headphones. But then they go and release the Audivina, and you just wonder, like, is this the same people? How did this happen? And you don't need a reviewer to tell them that it's not okay. It's not like we've got some special hearing or something.
Man, if anything, reviewers are going to tell them that it is okay, and that's the problem.
Yeah, there are reviewers who tell them it's okay, which is...
Yeah.
Ugh.
So
Yeah.
I suppose like it's an unfair question, right? Because it's like I could, put the people who I would say very much know what good is into, like a circle, and then many of the other reviewers would fall outside of that.
As would many of the manufacturers, I imagine.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Like, so, okay, I'm of the opinion that there can be multiple different versions of good. And you can have headphones that, I like both the HD 600 and the Focal Utopia. Now, they're not drastically different from one another, but they are different. And they do go for, different things. I also like the Hi-Fi and Susvara, right? So, and those are very different from one another. And clearly, I would imagine that along all three, the manufacturing or engineering philosophy is different as far as what they consider good to be. And yeah, I guess part of this for me is also because of the I'm not sure if have you guys been watching the Sennheiser video series that they've
Beyond
been
the
doing?
Curve.
Yeah.
I watched a few of them, but then I didn't like the answers Yermo gave to my questions, so I stopped watching.
I actually thought his was pretty good. I liked his overall. But yeah, he did not
uh,
answer your question.
he did not.
No.
That's fine.
Um,
I just think they should do a DSP-IM and call it. But
yeah.
sorry, you were saying?
No, it's just to me it's like, what do we think about, like, I guess that overall question of, like, does everything, like, is there room for different versions of good, different manufacturing engineering philosophies that end up with meaningfully different results, but you can see the thought process behind it and what they were going for. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Old School Odyssey is a really good example about this, because a lot of those, like the LCD2 and LCDX, still have staying power. Like, obviously not as much as they did, because there are other headphones out there that have kind of made those value propositions a little bit tougher. But I think that sound is still very nice for what it is, and people still like it and pay for it. And that's probably the weird, like, of any of the stuff you mentioned, like 600, Utopia, SSR, none of those are like really weird. You know what I mean? Like,
no,
those are all.
But I would say they're pretty different from one another. Maybe 600 and Utopia are closer to one another.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I still think all of those three are pretty close. But I think once you get to, like,
okay, I have yeah. So, like, again, the reason for this was because of a headphone where it's clear that they got the coarse grain stuff right, but then they wanted to flavorify it, right? And part of the design philosophy there is, okay, we recognize that this isn't neutral or neutral, right? We're not even shooting for that at this point. We want to make something, fun that people might enjoy. And to me, there's within that bucket, let's say, which is a different design philosophy from what I imagine the folks designing the Sesvaro were trying to do, or the HD600 were trying to do. Within that bucket, there's room for a lot of esoterica. And ultimately, in this case, it's not something that I think is going to be successful. But I can see, part of me is empathetic to the idea of, like, well, let's just make something fun, like let's make something that's, let's throw out the shackles of, neutral is preferred by most people. Let's just do something that is, kind of weird and kind of fun, and impart something unique to people's music. And,
yeah, there's charm. There's charm to the risk taken.
Yeah,
like I totally get why a manufacturer would go that route.
Yeah.
I think there's actually quite a bit more throwing stuff at the wall and trial and error in headphone development than people think. I think some people have the idea that certain companies are, they've got a particular goal in mind, and then they very carefully engineer everything to achieve exactly that result. I think a lot of the time, headphone
There's
companies
so much more
trying
compromise.
stuff, and then occasionally something comes out that's close to what they want or that is good. One thing that I do find interesting, though, is that you talk to some companies, and they, when they're developing stuff, will look at what other manufacturers are doing, look at measurements and subjective evaluation of competitors' products and things. Sometimes we'll, seed units to people to test and give feedback on. Was it Truthia that did the stuff at CanJam with the two different IEMs, different colors, and just getting feedback on it?
Wasn't that Vision Ears?
I thought Periodic did something like that.
And there was an IEM company.
I think Noble might have done it, and then I think Vision Ears might have also done it.
Yeah, and basically, they came to CanJam and they had two different models, and they gave them to people and said, which one do you like more and why?
Yeah,
and then there's other companies who buy their own.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was Dunu. That was the one. But then there's other companies who, by their own admission, don't look at what anyone else is doing. They just kind of do their own thing, and then put their own product out once they feel it's ready. And those companies, more often than not, I think, are missing rather than hitting. And that's something which I find odd. Like, doing no market research effectively seems like an unusual business choice, but it's surprising how common it is. And some of it, I think, is honestly a bit of pretentiousness. There's some companies who believe that, no, well, the way that we're doing things is right.
Yeah.
And
there's
people will
plenty of
like
that.
it. And then get very surprised when people don't like what they put out. But,
Do you think that there's a more correct design philosophy and a less correct one in this in the sense of, you know, and
open back is correct, closed back is incorrect.
No. So like, I'm thinking along the lines of like, I do think it is more correct to aim for, you know, something that reasonably resembles an ear transfer function that has a, you know, a base to treble delta that is reasonably, you know, normal for people, than it is to. I think that's better to shoot for than to play in the sandbox of esoterica.
I think,
you know,
it depends on. You can't make a product which is very different from what research shows the majority of people aren't looking for, and then be surprised when the majority of people don't like it.
That's fair.
That's a good way to frame it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is absolutely room for esoterica, and we know that there are different preference groups, and there should be products to cater to those. But if you're wanting something which is going to be a smash hit, you kind of have to go towards what, again, the research shows the majority of people will prefer. And there are a lot of companies who completely disregard that and don't do any market research and don't do any comparisons to anything else or get any kind of feedback, and then wonder why stuff doesn't do very well. I mean,
or there are companies that do exactly that, follow the research, but the research isn't actually congruent with what people want.
Yeah, or they make a mistake along the way or something.
Yeah,
I mean, you're thinking of IEMs, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'm thinking
Yeah,
of situations where they're aiming for the right thing, but it didn't work out in practice.
I mean, even if you're not looking at the the research and stuff, and you're just sort of doing things how you think it should be. Okay, so the mod has tungstens, a good example of this. Ryan didn't base the target, and he didn't tune it towards what the literature says he should have done. He basically looked at the headphones and went that he thought a zero damping, a sort of low acoustic impedance design as possible, as open as possible approach would be best. And then he basically made some prototypes, gave them to people, said, tell me what's wrong with this. Tell me what you don't like about it. And then he went away and changed stuff. And then he gave some stuff back to people. And then he fixed the problems that remained there. And he did that 3 or 4 times. And
he did that also with people that he trusted very much.
Yes.
Like, yeah. It wasn't just
the people that
across the board, right?
No. And obviously, as a company developing a product, you can't seed prototypes to 1,000 people. It doesn't work that way. You've got to pick who you're going to trust to give you that information, and who you pick is going to influence what choices you end up making. But I think the point is that him doing that with a number of people who he trusted, and people that had tried a lot of other stuff as well and had spent lots of their own money on various different products, and got quite honest and in some cases quite blunt feedback about some of the problems it had, and he didn't stop until there weren't any more complaints for the most part. And the end result, I think, is absolutely excellent. And I wish more companies, I think the summary is that I wish more companies got feedback on their products and looked at what competitors are doing, rather than just going, I think this is the best way to do it, I'm just going to give that a go and hope for the best.
You bring up something interesting, though, that is, obviously you can't send it out to everyone, but Ryan chose people he knew were experienced with a lot of headphones, and that he knew probably their taste and their approach to judging a product.
Yeah.
Because if someone tells you something like apropos of no context, like you don't have the context of who they are and what they like,
it carries no weight
or what
if
their
you don't
experience
know.
is.
Yeah.
It can be shockingly useless information. Which, if anything, I kind of wish certain brands did a little bit less of that kind of impression farming, and did something a little bit more personal, or had more long-term concrete relationships with people that they know generally are both reasonable but have I guess, good reasons for their takes and that are measured in how they respond about things.
Good.
Because I feel like if you just do a scattershot approach where you're accepting any sort of criticism, you're going to end up with something that probably has too much bass and probably has too much treble
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
might have a
you've got,
huge scoop in the mids. And
you've got to do it over either a large enough sample size that the sort of individual tastes start to get less
diffused a little bit.
outliers.
Yeah,
But then obviously you end up in the problem of, if you are a large manufacturer, you can't have 1,000 people testing out a product. It's taking away from your sales, and also you don't necessarily want to be shouting and screaming about the product you're developing before it's released. But yeah, so that's an interesting one, actually.
Blaine's saying, I'm saying it's a shame that there aren't more distinct, refined flavors. I mean, I still want things to trend reasonable, but
Wait,
yeah, I don't know.
that
I don't
you're
want
saying?
everything to trend the same. We got to balance it.
Well, specifically,
Just filter out anyone who
harmonizing.
says that cables make a difference. Just ignore what they say.
Hey, they do make a difference in next to no impedance case. They can potentially.
If you have RALs.
Yeah, exactly.
RAL's got a new headphone coming out. 2 new headphones coming out.
Wait, 2 new headphones coming out?
Two slightly different versions of the same thing. It's coming out at CanJam, New York.
What's the difference?
I don't.
It's a
I think
ribbon,
we can
right?
talk
It's
about
like
it because it's
we
been
can.
posted all over Headphone.
Yeah, I don't know.
Can we? Or
I have no idea. I don't know if we can talk about it.
if you don't know, it's probably best not to.
Okay, yeah, let's not. I'm pretty sure it's been posted. Go look on Headphone. I've seen lots of stuff, but I won't say anything just in case.
Cool.
But,
yeah,
that's fun though. I haven't seen much about any brands having new stuff for CanJam.
Yeah,
there's definitely a few. They just seem to. Well, I think we'll probably learn more once Jude's Headphone video comes out.
So that's actually my topic number 4 is CanJam, CanJam New York.
Let's take this opportunity to move to that then.
Yeah. What is there anything you guys are excited for, in particular, CanJam New York?
I'm obviously biased, but I'm launching my collab deck, which I'm very excited about.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Listener?
I'm mostly excited for the talks and meeting Joel.
There's going to be some good seminars.
Yeah, there's a seminar from Blaine, which is going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I had a dream last night that I was looking at an unreleased AKG prototype from 1988, and for some reason its detachable cable had full-size XLR connectors.
That sounds so cursed.
Yeah. For me, this CanJam's going to be a bit different.
What's that?
So normally we go to these shows and we do interviews with, we're media basically.
Yeah.
We roll around the show floor, do coverage, do media, and try out products, and we put together videos for CanJam coverage. This year, I won't be doing any of that because I am banned from the States.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can attend, but I'm not allowed to produce any videos.
Can't work.
Yeah, I can't work, essentially.
Got it.
So I will be on one of the panels, and Golden, I think you're going to be on that too, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll be on that one. Should be interesting.
Is that the one moderated by Zach?
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, the Crin's on it. I think Zeos is on it. So it's similar to how it was done in previous years, I think.
That's a new thing which I'm looking forward to trying, actually, is the ZMF Bokeh. I did try it at CanJam London, but I think that version wasn't quite finished yet. I like that one, but I'm looking forward to trying the actual final thing, because that's quite an exciting price point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to try it at SoCal because I was working the event. I do need to try that headphone.
Someone says, are you bringing the B&K? I'm not, but actually, I believe DMS might be
DMS is
bringing
going to try and bring his.
Yeah, I don't think that's the B&K most people are interested in, but they should be.
It's still a good,
still a good head. Come on, guys.
It's still a head, right? I think that's the biggest issue that we often miss with measurement rigs is that people think of them as like, this is an indication of, well, but then this is an indication of like the average human, and it's not in any of the cases. It's
Yeah.
a human, right?
Yeah,
It's like
it's a median result of a data set that they
it's
happen
a
to have.
yeah of a data set they happen to have, right? It's like it's not like you took the entire population of the world and then put the average ear into the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, you know, in both cases for the B&K and the Gross, they overestimate the treble for the pinna effects, right? So
I'm just imagining TNA's expression as they just see a torso show up on the scanner.
it's not gonna. I think he's just gonna take the head, which is even more hilarious. Yeah,
Oh, that's way better. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but I'm really trying to rack my brain to see if there are any CanJam releases that I didn't hear at SoCal that I'm really excited for. I'm hoping that Let's Shore has the Cadenza 4 at their booth because I liked the 12, but I'm
So
hoping this
the
is more controlled.
the biggest one that I'm excited to try is the DCA E3, and the Carina, but I didn't get a chance to listen to the E3 yet. So, and there's been a bunch of releases that I haven't, you know, tried. So
The difference between Stealth and E3 when measured on the same rig seems to be that they added treble in the exact spot I hate. So I'm not overly thrilled to try it, but we'll see what's up.
Well, yeah, I'm optimistic because, well, I don't know. Part of it is because DMS didn't like the Expanse at all. Really didn't like it.
I don't think any of us did.
Yeah,
oh,
none of us
Cameron, you
did.
might have liked that, but
I
not
was
liked
more
Stealth.
neutral on it. I didn't dislike
Got
it. I just wasn't like excited about it.
But then really like the E3, right? So, you know, to me, it's like, okay,
a lot of people do seem to like E3 that didn't like Dan's other more recent headphones. So.
Yeah. Blaine found the Expanse to be shallow and pedantic. Are you talking about the TV show?
Pedantic.
I'm reading that in Peter Griffin's voice.
Oh, if you read most things Blaine says in Peter Griffin's voice. Andrew's the most infamous meth lord in the Pacific Northwest, and that's why he has the Walter White haircut. Yeah, that's why. That's why.
I can't think of too many more releases. I don't know if many companies have actually announced their releases yet. I know that there are a couple things, one of which is very nice but too expensive for me to get excited about, and another one is not good enough to be excited about.
Oh, the one that we're
talking about. Yeah. But yeah, I think we'll probably see a few more bits once the preview video is out.
Yeah. The preview video that should be out pretty soon, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm mostly excited for the food.
The food. Do you not get food in where you are? Is like New York the only place that you're able to get food?
I used to live in Queens.
Oh.
I moved here a few years ago, but I'm very excited to go back to Queens, specifically Flushing, and go to this place called the New World Mall.
This place called
I don't know if
Flushing?
either of you have ever. Yeah, the town is called Flushing.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like a hub of a lot of Asian immigrants. So it's a very like Asian area. So
you like that kind of food, you should come to Vancouver.
Incredible.
Vancouver has.
I mean, if you want to pay for my lodging, absolutely.
We should get you up here at some point. I will say Vancouver does have a good food scene. Like
that's what I've heard.
Yeah, especially for that kind of food.
Again, what I've heard.
Although, that was by far and away the best thing about my vacation to Thailand was the food. It was amazing,
I'm sure.
And it was really cheap. And I came back here, and I was so just like, oh man, like even just like the average food here costs like 5 times more than it would in Thailand, right? And it's nowhere near as good. So yeah.
Kevin just mentioned the final D7000.
Oh yeah, D7000. Yeah, curious about that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and the RALs. I'm looking forward to trying the RALs as well.
Yeah.
Need to bring that incredibly thick cable as well. See if that makes a difference.
I feel like I'm obligated to bring this to the show because Sennheiser has said they're not going to have it.
Do you want to give your just sort of Cliff Notes thoughts on the?
Yeah, I probably should because I did see at least one person ask about it. Yeah, so imagine an HD 560S, but you scooped the mids, like the
But it makes
2K area.
that sounds worse.
Yeah, that doesn't sound
Actually,
like
I prefer it to the 560S. Like the 560S to me is very like lean, bright, and limp. Like it's essentially the Harman target, but without the bass that balances out the fact that it's not especially, um, I guess, dark
Right.
or neutral of a target above 200 hertz.
Sure.
Um, so I feel like the 2K dip actually does help bring it to more of a sense of tonal equilibrium, even though it is still too bright. It does help the bass's contributions be more noticeable.
So like a bit of V shape ish.
So like with the pads that I'm not wearing, the producer pads, even the stock tonality is like it's closer to like the MDR MV1 by Sony,
Oh,
or
this.
yeah, where it's like really really thick under 1,000 hertz, has a 2K scoop, and then too much treble. Sorry for
Well,
hitting my
the
mic.
Sony, you don't notice the thickness because it's just like 6K plus
It's
to the
it's
max,
it's
right?
the same with
Oh,
the
really?
producer pads on these. Yeah,
Oh,
where it's like deceptively thin. Like when you're looking at the graph, you would think it's a lot warmer than it is. Um, but it's not. It's a treble dominant sound. The mixing pads, they reduce bass and bring up the. It's kind of like the difference between like the modern Hi-Fi Man and like HE6, where this
oh yeah.
lifts up the
Okay.
1 to 2K area. Um, but it actually smooths out the 4K area as well, so it's a little less gritty and grainy.
Okay.
But the extra 1K does make it more. It impresses more dynamically upon
G-
me, which is nice.
give me your vibes take. What's the
My vibes.
quimble like and the resolution and
It's
the
mid.
mid? Okay. All right.
The Quimble is
So the
mid.
quimble is mid. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, HD 600 is a better headphone. HD 650 is a better headphone. I would probably, even though it's brighter, take it over the 660S2.
That's because that's an average headphone.
It's mediocre.
Yeah.
Um, it's
apparently the
I
stream's just died.
Uh,
oh
it's everything is working on my end.
yeah, I'm watching it too, and it looks okay.
Is it dropping?
Is it audio dropping or is it video and audio? Oh shit.
I have it at 5,000 bitrate. Someone says stream is fine. I'll make sure I'm not like.
The stream could not handle listeners' opinions.
I'm just exiting out of all the things.
Seems to be back now, apparently.
Oh yeah, Scott said it just came back.
There we go. All right.
It
Okay.
could just be also a YouTube thing. Sometimes
That's
YouTube-
what I assume if everyone's getting it.
Yeah.
But like I'm not. Regardless.
I'll drop them
The
for you.
Quimble is mid. I would take it over 660S2 because the 660S2 has that like 4 to 5K cut, which robs it of texture, and then the same kind of bloom that the other 6 series stuff has. So it's like really muffled and indistinct in the mid range, and then the treble is worse than 600 and 650 in character. It just seems like they raised upper treble and lower treble, and the mid treble was what bothered me already, so now it's just too bright up there. I don't really get anything special in terms of dynamics or soundstage or detail or any of the other words that people use to relay positive headphone experiences to people. I don't think it's a very good headphone, but it is comfortable. It is light. It is fairly open, especially with the mixing pads.
Yeah.
I want to measure it on other rigs to see how HPTF invariant it may be.
It's funny because like these days, to me, when I'm like evaluating headphones, that matters so much more somehow. I'm not gonna say it matters more than the frequency response, but like
it matters more than the frequency response to me.
there is, yeah, like
To me, if I'm buying,
no, like right, okay, but like we have to recognize that a good frequency response or a headphone with a generally good frequency response is going to be better for most people
Right.
than
Like I
a
would never
headphone with a
review
bad
something with a
frequency
bad
response.
frequency
Yeah,
response and say, "Hey guys, you should all go buy this," even
yeah,
though it measures terribly.
yeah.
Um,
Like
but I
measures
might.
terribly,
I
but
don't know.
HPTF invariant.
Depends. Yeah,
So
I mean,
thumbs up.
the argument could be made that HD 800 does fall in that camp.
Yes, I would put
I
it.
wouldn't say
I,
it does, but
I would put it squarely in that camp. I would say, the 6K peak on that is, well, actually, to be clear, I believe that the reason Blaine doesn't hear the 6K peak or the peaky treble issues that I hear, I believe that is actually an HPTF thing.
yeah, I mean, it could be that
So
or an HRTF thing.
it could be.
And
I
and Blaine says what constitutes HBTF invariant is a
Okay.
philosophical question.
Yes. Yeah. So the reason why I'm thinking that though is, I mean, it could just be like a coupling thing. But I was running an FFT with the HD100S and just seeing how it would change based on the placement. And I noticed
On a
there were
rig?
actually, on the rig.
Okay.
And there were actually a couple of placements where that peak just goes away. It just is gone. Which was interesting. I mean, obviously that's just one head and it's not necessarily his head or my head. But
I wouldn't be surprised if that was something that happens on a lot of headphones on a lot of heads.
on a lot of heads, yeah.
Yeah.
So and we talk about like the HD100S being actually very good, better than most headphones, one of the best headphones for consistent response, right? But if for some people it's like slightly like this or slightly like this, depending on the shape and the contour of their head, that could actually have an effect.
That's actually a problem I had with the Composer, is that I thought it had a channel imbalance, but it doesn't. It's just really sensitive to
Really
positioning.
sensitive, unbelievably
Really
sensitive to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. It helps when you change the angle of the, you can lift up the little nubbin and then turn
Yeah.
that helped. Sorry, what's Blaine saying here?
It's
It's almost like we should have FR variation versus frequency plots. Wouldn't that be neat?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's. I don't know if he pitched it exactly the same way, because I wasn't there for the pitches, but I think Keith Howard used to do something like that.
Doesn't ratings have something where it's like, oh, is that unit consistency?
Well, yeah, they have frequency response consistency
Yeah.
in a few different scenarios, but what Blaine is talking about is like, at least I think, like a field where it's the FR, but like instead of being a line, it's like a field that widens and narrows based on how much variation a specific frequency has. It's really, really, really cool. If I could get Squig to do that, I would do it in an instant.
Does Oratory have that for his?
So yeah, he has the shaded confidence intervals, which is because he measures multiple units, at least as far as I'm aware, this is why he does it that way. It's to describe how 90% of units may behave. Right? Whereas what Blaine is talking about is like FR variation at a specific point on that unit.
Yeah. Okay.
If anyone's good at CanJam New York, do come to the talk that myself, Blaine, and Oratory are doing. Oratory segment is about this exactly, and it's really good.
Yeah. We still need to do more with HPTF. And to answer Blaine, yeah, we don't. So make it happen. Yes.
I'm being oppressed.
I'm being oppressed. Good.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah. Blaine just sent me an image of the Keith Howard FR
Okay.
plots, and they are beautiful. They are. We should do this.
Let's get into spicy hour now. I've exhausted
Okay.
our topics. I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to talk about. I would want to start spicy hour with what is, apart from things you can't talk about because stuff's not announced yet. What are some awful headphones that you've listened to recently? Like headphones.
Oh, the Foztex, the one that DMS. I've forgotten the model name. The one.
Yeah.
The DMS reviewed recently.
CH616. Is that what it is?
something
Which
like that.
that's a good example of what we were talking about earlier, where they didn't look at all at what competitors were doing and didn't kind of. Apparently, I'm basing things on what I've heard someone said to someone else. So forgive me if I'm what I'm saying is not correct. But apparently, they basically didn't look at what competitors are doing at all, and that was the result.
Sick.
And it was not very good. And then
Yeah, I don't.
something which I mean, it's not terrible. It's disappointing from what it could have been, which is the thing which we can't talk about yet. And
Oh
I'm
yeah,
frustrated about that because it actually could have, if they had fixed that.
it's better
Blaine.
than okay. I won't. Things
All
we can't
reviewers
talk
should
about.
use affiliate links for all reviews. If all reviews have them, there's no incentive shift, and 100% of the cost is borne by the source. No, because then
That's a terrible
depending on
take.
the percentage given by the affiliate link and how expensive the product is, there's still factors there. So I would say that's
that is a hell
that's-
that YouTube is
that's
trending
not.
towards.
I mean, yeah, it's not spicy. It's wrong, but it's also unfortunately just becoming fact. So
Yeah.
Blame the soothsayer.
Yeah. I mean, like, if I had to, I mean, this is what I do now vocationally, but like, if I undid the past 4 years or whatever, and that was my option for doing YouTube, I wouldn't have done it. Straight up.
I
It's
don't.
like
I don't think
not
any
interested.
of us would have done it.
no,
Yeah.
I can happily say that I have still to this day never used an affiliate link, and gladly so.
Yeah.
Blaine saying you're assuming that net spend changes based on reviews. No, I'm not assuming that net spend changes. I'm assuming that as a reviewer, assuming you were going to use affiliate links in everything, you would then have an incentive to try to convince manufacturers of more expensive products to give you stuff. Because then effectively you're competing against other reviewers to review the most expensive stuff. And that causes all sorts of problems. So it's not necessarily that the market in terms of consumers is changing their net spend. It's that there's now a sort of market of reviewers competing for
And that's not a
share
blank.
of that
That's not a
spend.
blank slate for the market of reviewers either.
Well,
Like
what do you mean?
Well, like, you don't get the same, like, if you have 1 million subscribers, that's very different from if you have like 10.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
Cameron should have just done the color change collab and donated the money if that had easiest content. I mean, maybe, but it just feels grimy. So I just didn't want that headache.
All right, here's from Scott. We need to work on miniaturization, Ray, instead of building headphones. Then you could miniaturize an orchestra and put them in boxes by your ears. Now, if I had a miniaturization, Ray, I would miniaturize Blaine, and then I would have a Blaine on my desk. I could just pocket Blaine.
That sounds. I don't know. I love Blaine, but man has.
Like I mean, it would
man
have
can talk so much.
It would have a
on
cage with
basic things.
with it would have a
Griffin,
soundproof
you put that
cage.
fork back incorrectly. Joel would or Blaine would absolutely use it to troll me.
Yeah.
You'd be like loading your dishwasher, and he'd come up with some scientific literature about the most optimal way to load your dishwasher. And
No, I'd just get him to load the dishwasher.
give us some more spicy takes to discuss. Blaine's just bullying me at the moment, so
Yeah.
Blaine is just attacking Cameron. See, I told you.
Cameron has literally chosen to avoid ickiness over sending that colored collab money to starving children, and therefore should be cancelled. All right, sure. I'm just not even gonna try anymore.
Ty, one of few streams caught, but Blaine talks a whole lot. Lol. Yes, he does.
All right, we need more spicy takes.
Yeah, we need spice that isn't from Blaine. He's literally our resident edgy boy. None of this is new.
What was your headphone that you didn't like recently, other than the 490 Pro?
I mean, so I recently got 660S2, HD 490 Pro, and Composer in, and I dislike them all. So,
yeah. But none of them are gonna. I mean, this is expected. I mean, none of them are 24 dB tilted. So
all of them have treble that is basically DF.
Yeah.
Which I don't think any of us in a vacuum are trying to make excuses for. I think once we have a headphone in and we can listen to it, vibe with it, understand what it's going for, yeah, I get it. I get what they're going for, especially with the Composer. But I don't like any of them.
Right.
I
You would
wouldn't
never
ever elect.
personally choose any of them,
No,
even if you
no.
understand what they're going for.
Even if I had the money,
Yeah.
I would elect to buy an HD 650.
Yeah.
Composer, the trouble's interesting because I find it too bright, but it's not like individual peaks that are problematic. That's usually more problematic because then it's harder to EQ, and or you have to position it exactly correct and stuff. Whereas composer, I can just add a shelf and it's fine.
Yep.
So I don't actually mind it too much. For me, as
Yeah.
long as something is, if it's correctable with a basic shelf, I'm totally fine with it.
I feel that. I would say this one is probably the only one on my head that is correctable with the shelf. The composer has a 5K
Yeah.
glare on my head that doesn't work. And then the 660S2, it's got it needs a shelf and a lift in the upper mid presence area. So it's not simple.
It's
It's never simple.
It's 650 adjacent, but not as good in a number of ways that for ear gain specifically.
I mean, in the way that would make 650 better than most of the stuff coming out, in my opinion, already.
Well, so like I could see why people would like the 660 S2 if they want
Yeah.
that. If they're if they're Lorho gang, for example, but
Or if they're Force Technologies gang.
if they're what?
Force Technologies, the people that did that listener preference test that on the 5128 that confirmed that something Harman-like good.
What?
The
How
second
would this?
most preferred result was something that was vaguely similar to the AirPods Max, or I think it was the AirPods Max, where it dips the pinna gain but boosts the treble.
Okay, that's something which I think if I
The
could
one they
sort
used
of
to
peer
close
in,
back for?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
if I could like have a look at the internal sort of research and knowledge of any company in audio right now, it would be Apple. It feels like they've just got some really cool stuff that
Actually,
obviously they're not
I don't
sharing.
think.
But
I don't think I would be that interested in Apple anymore.
really, not even with like the AirPods stuff.
I'd be interested in the audio research for Meta. I just follow Gaytown around the internet.
Just follow Lorho around. Yeah,
Yeah.
I disagree with you, Andrew. Apple is absolutely
No, I'm
the
obviously joking, right?
people
Like I'm just saying, I'm just saying I would like because Lorho is now for Meta, right? Like he doesn't work.
Yes,
for...
yes. But I mean, I think Apple is investing plenty into the same things that Lorho is working on, which is I think virtualization.
I mean, the next frontier for audio is immersive audio of some kind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. I mean, look, I think we're
real
already in a
soundstage.
position with the AirPods Pro 2 where Apple basically makes the entire consumer IEM market look like crap.
Yeah.
And it's obviously because they have DSP inside that works very well for what they're setting out to do.
And is quite adaptive seemingly as well.
Yeah, that's what they're setting out to do basically is adapt to the individual
Seemingly
canals
cool
under a
stuff
certain
you can
point.
do when you've got hundreds of billions of dollars to throw at R&D. So.
Yeah, but I think we're going to continue down that path where over-ear headphones kind of I'm hoping this is the case with the AirPods Max 2. I'm hoping that what happens is that comes out and it makes audiophile over-ear headphones similarly irrelevant to me as audiophile IEMs are compared to AirPods Pro 2.
I think it might end up getting to that point. I think it'll be a while though. I mean, just because
I'm not overly optimistic, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, the one was so bad.
To me, over-ear headphones come with some complications, especially that they're obviously going to be doing a closed back.
Well, IEMs. Well, I mean, not more than close back, but. IEMs...
Well, no, I mean, IEMs have plenty of challenges.
Yeah.
But they're. Yeah, I don't know. If I had to choose one that they would effectively solve first, it would be IEMs, just because there are less factors.
MRL says frequency response graphs are so frequently wrongfully used or too much based upon that it is more harmful than helpful to the hobby. I think if you could go and have a look through just like HeadFi, even 5 years ago, you might change your mind. Like the amount of crap that's been weeded out based on the increased prevalence of measurements is
I actually disagree.
really.
I think there's still plenty of crap.
Oh no,
And
there is, but like, I think that it used to be if you were a consumer that didn't have the opportunity to go and try a hell of a lot of stuff in person. Like, let's say you can't go to CanJam, it was 5 years ago so much harder to find something which is actually going to fit your preferences compared to today.
I think you still need to get to a spot with measurements where you know how to read them, how
This
they
is
compare
where
to things you have actually heard,
I actually laid the
and
blame
the
for
limitations
this
of them. Sorry?
I lay the blame for this at the feet of Squiglink. I think that's the problem.
So we were talking about this on Discord today because Hawaii Bad Boy just released a video that basically is that exact topic, which is that frequency response graphs have ruined the hobby. And I see the point, frankly. I think there's so much, if not misinformation, misinterpretation, and misattribution.
Like the default position that I've come across with what frequency response describes is people think it only describes tonality. And
Yeah.
that to me is where, you know, like I run into that same position where I think it has actually it's kind of ruining things.
I mean, there's an extent to which people are attributing not enough, saying that it only describes tonality. And there's an extent to which they're attributing, like, or they're misattributing too little or too much. They're saying it explains too much and it explains too little. Like, it doesn't explain why I feel this technical
It doesn't
impression.
explain their experience, but it's like
But it's objectively correct enough in interpretation
yeah. Well,
for them
okay,
to say this is trash just from looking at it.
At the same time, people are correct in terms of the like the attribution of it only describing tonality is correct in the sense that you probably shouldn't be reading the tea leaves if you're looking at you know, at a graph. You should be considering it first and foremost in terms of its wideband effects, right? Like what the wideband results would be. At the same time, that at least, okay, maybe this is a spicy take, but the prevalence of Squiglink and also in particular many of the clone couplers, and just the sheer massive uncurated data is probably going to lead people to the wrong conclusions about what frequency response ultimately describes at the eardrum.
Yeah.
I think, rereading his comment about them being wrongfully used, I think maybe that's... I still disagree overall that it's had a net negative effect. I think that that's false. But there are absolutely a hell of a lot of people that are not necessarily, intentionally, but just because there is a knowledge gap. It's not everyone understands the difference between different rigs, different compensations, smoothing things to different levels, because even just whether something's been averaged or whether it's a single position, all that kind of stuff are not necessarily things that someone, even who otherwise knows how to roughly read a frequency response graph, actually understands or thinks about. And so when you've got measurements that are from different setups, not averaged or positioned the same way, and being compared to, and people are trying to either, well, in some cases it's quite a significant difference, or in others it's reading the tea leaves on the treble profile and this spike's a little bit higher, or this one's got a little bit more spike, when it could be something as simple as just pulling the IEM out a couple millimeters or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my issue is that the people making this take, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying this about you specifically, MRL, but I feel like the people who loudly make the take that FR is making the hobby worse are generally the people that are
you could say it,
are guilty of misrepresenting their own data very often, and are the people who might be contributing to the confusion on what FR does and doesn't represent. Like I feel like a lot of the people who say FR is ruining the hobby are the people that are like anti-graph.
Oh yeah, yeah, the anti-graph contingent. There's
Which is
people who
fair
are.
to be anti-graph to an extent.
I mean, there are people
It's
who
never
are.
it's never people like Joel making this take though,
Yeah, no.
loudly.
Yeah, it's usually people
Just in
who
our
don't who
DMs.
have like they it they've come across a graph, and it indicates that the thing that they like is bad, and then that's where their willingness to understand the graph stops. Their willingness
Yeah,
to understand metrics
or
and
even
data
beyond like a
stops.
judgment of good and bad. An example that Hawaii Bad Boy gives in the video is he has two IEMs on a 7-Eleven measurement on his database, and he's comparing the low end of them, which, by the way, already cringing at this point in the
Yep.
video. But and he's saying this IEM with the less bass sounds a lot better on kick drums, sounds more punchy and impactful, and it's like, okay, more bass does not necessarily mean that the kick drum is going to sound better, bud.
That's
And
something which I
if
Or
think.
it's two different IEMs
but
with
it's
completely different driver principles and designs,
right. So like,
we don't know how it's actually responding in the eardrum.
I haven't watched the video, so I can't comment on that. But like, is the assumption that more bass should make it so that the kick drum is more impactful?
I'm pretty sure he said bassier, but the words he was using to describe the kick drum made it seem like he was saying that the lower one should not be more visceral or impactful or whatever than the higher one.
Well, we obviously
That's a case
know
of.
that we
Sorry,
obviously
go
know
ahead.
there are two issues with that. One being that if you look at that, what was that? There's so many charts on this, but basically the ones that show the relationship between fundamental and harmonic tones. So for where the kick drum falls isn't just the bass, right? That's the first thing. So the second would be the bigger one that we know that most people probably don't know, which is that the acoustic Z on the clone on the 711 couplers is less than accurate. So you could actually have two IEMs that measured the same. I don't know how much delta there would be can you think of a scenario where there'd be an IEM that would measure lower in the bass on 711 but higher in the bass on a 4620 or 5128 than
Higher?
the other? Yeah, I know we obviously know examples where it's like there's a bigger delta, right?
So I
But
asked
I don't know if it would be like more,
I asked Blaine about this once, and I don't remember what he said. I think the best you could realistically get would be zero change.
Zero change. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I don't know if because it would have to be like a negative acoustic
Yeah.
impedance out, or
But
a
at the
negative
very least, we could
acoustic
say
output
that
impedance, but I don't know if such a thing
Yeah.
exists in
Yeah.
the real world.
At the very least, though, we could say that the actual bass level is not something that could be accurately gleaned from the 711 graph with those,
Right.
Especially
Right.
if we don't know what if it's like a sealed BA vented DD or whatever, right? Like we don't know the rest of this. I don't know the rest of the story there.
Yeah. Also, we're supposed to let Cameron speak. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, Hawaii Bad Boy's comment there about, well, one's bassier, so therefore it should have a more prominent kick drum, is assuming that it's just about the level of the bass itself, when we've got plenty of information to say that that's not necessarily the case. A lot of people, for example, find dynamic driver headphones to sound more punchy, and most dynamic driver headphones have an elevated level of sort of like 100 hertz content compared to sub bass. And in fact, we've seen that in certain headphones, like Dan Clark. When people said, "Oh, your headphones aren't slammy enough," he added a bit of a hump around 100 hertz.
Yeah, like
made it slammier.
I don't think that actually fixed
Some
it.
people.
No,
It made it worse to me.
I actually think it made it worse.
But there's other things like, if you try listening to a kick drum and then you put a low pass filter so that everything above like 10 kilohertz is cut off, it sounds less punchy. It's not just about the bass content. There's other frequency content there as well.
Yeah, so that's the point number one, right? Where it's like I should really have that chart handy, but it's the one that basically shows like, okay, this is the fundamental range for percussive hits, snare drums, and here's the harmonic, the rest of it. So when something tokens that those frequencies. Here's the breakdown for fundamental, and here it is for harmonics. And obviously for bass drums, it's not just the bass, right? There's basically FR relationships that are going to have an influence there. That it's more sophisticated than just bass level. I mean, I think, listener, you even had a theory about 6K being involved for certain
With kick drums?
with dynamics or something like that.
So the elements that usually token dynamics are like kick drums and snare drums, and both of them have significant energy in like the 60 to 150 hertz band, the 1 kilohertz band, and then the 3 to 5 kilohertz band.
Okay, maybe, yeah.
And if
along
you
those lines, yeah.
if you can suss out a balance between those three things across headphones, you'll find that trends emerge.
Yeah. It's one of those areas where it's not that the graph doesn't necessarily show it. There's a problem with interpretation, not what we can actually measure. And I mean, so someone just made a comment of where was it? I'm trying to find it now. TJ Cook says FR graphs are being used to try and turn audio gear into a spec race or treat headphones like PC components. I want something that I like, not what a graph likes. But the point is, the graph is supposed to help you find what you like. A lot of people misuse the Harman target as anything that deviates from Harman, even slightly, is bad, and you should objectively always have it exactly to the Harman curve. That's the best, unquestionably. And that's literally not what the research says.
Yeah.
The point is that, with diffuse field and just graphs in general, it's supposed to help you find these characteristics without having to rely on the quite unreliable, feedback from other people. You're supposed to be able to find this kind of stuff and work out what you're likely to enjoy based on that information.
Oh, Cameron's camera died.
Oh, Cameron.
That's a good point, though. That like the frequency response graph, what you see there, right? And like people, this is the problem with I suppose the default way that it shows up, and maybe this is something we can kind of help with. This is part of the reason why we went with this project in the first place, to use the DFHRTF. It's to try and make it so that it's a better at face value representation of this stuff, so that people understand FR at the eardrum is really, that's what we're trying to figure out for people, or help people figure out for themselves.
It's the responsibility of the people presenting the data to tell people why the data might not be intuitive and lead them through that process.
There's a whole bunch more spicy takes here, which is good. I'm going to ignore the one from Blaine,
as you
because
should.
we're in the process
always.
of oppressing. There's
Too much bass makes bass attack hit like a wet noodle. That's
Yeah,
just
that's kinda what we're
just a
talking
good
about, yeah.
take. That's
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
good take.
There's
Yeah, if you think about a transient, the treble's going to arrive first and the bass is going to arrive last. If you have too much bass, you're kind of throwing that balance out of whack.
I would be quite interested just to see if there's anything with, because IEMs specifically are different from headphones in that they've got crossovers and multiple drivers.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be curious to see if some of the IEMs that are especially slammy or very, less than dynamic.
looking for excess group delay stuff.
Yeah, just around the crossover regions and stuff, just to
Interesting.
see if there's anything that can be found there.
Could
Worth
be
checking
interesting.
There was saturation in the market with flavor of the month headphones is good for the hobby. More headphones equals more better. It's true. Well, I was thinking though, do you think there's a scenario where like there are hidden gems that get missed or glossed over because of the saturation?
Yeah, probably.
Like the High Senior Mega Fest?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good example.
Maybe that's a downside. Have too many headphones. But yeah, I think more
It
headphones
is.
equals more better, And plus the nice thing about headphones is that if you have one headphone, if you want to make it better, you just get another headphone. And if you want to make that better, it's kind of like RAM, you can just download more.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but you have to wear them all at the same time to get the
Yeah.
collected benefits of all of them.
Exactly.
Blaine
Someone
is
says,
saying-
"Oh, go ahead." Yeah.
Blaine's saying all headphone amps should have EQs built in. I don't think all amps should, just because doing it in analog can have some drawbacks and less flexible. I think that for the most part, all DACs probably should at some point, or at least there should be some option in your players. Like everyone should have EQ.
Yes.
Yeah.
1000%.
every single time, I mean, even not just in headphones, but every single time I go to a show with speakers, the rooms that sound the best are the ones that are using room correction. And
Oh yeah.
I don't understand people who are like, no, you shouldn't do any of that. So it makes such a even more than headphones. And
What
with
was
headphones, there are so many headphones that you can make so much better with EQ. People are still so afraid of it.
yeah.
That's a stigma which I think we should push back against.
What was
Well, I think a lot of people have negative experiences with EQ, and not really of any fault of their own.
No,
Like most of
it's the fault of Jaco Paasen and Auto EQ. as we
I mean, again, we've talked about
concluded,
this,
yeah.
and I think we landed on it being a net good.
Well,
but
Blaine landed on it being a net good. I'm not entirely sure that I agree, but
Yeah, I'm a little bit more on Resolve's side there. I think that EQ should. I don't like trying to EQ headphones completely flat for all of the reasons that have been discussed many times before.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think there is one way to approach EQ, and it is to do it. It is to do it in the best way, which is the personalization way, not to a graph. You know.
And
Yeah,
at some point, it will
there's
become
such a
something which
variety
is
of
automatic. That's what Apple's doing, right? Their AirPods automatically EQ to your HRTF to some degree. That's what they're
Do they?
doing. Yeah.
Every time
Isn't
I've tried one of those things, it's never worked. So I don't know.
So I don't think it. Someone please correct me in chat if I'm wrong about this, but I don't think the HRTF measured stuff. I don't think that applies to the tonality of the IEM unless you're doing the spatial audio with head tracking.
I thought it was just to
okay.
compensate for HPTF issues.
Oh, I
I'm
don't.
not
Well,
sure.
so there are different types. I thought what Cameron was talking about because they said HRTF was to do.
Sorry, are you
like,
talking
the,
about
the
the
picture of
new
the ear.
product or the existing ones?
No, the AirPods Pro 2.
AirPods Pro 2.
Pro 2, okay.
Like, it was one of the reasons why it was difficult to measure, right?
I don't know.
Oh,
if
okay,
that's
no.
why.
So you're talking about the feedback mechanism, the feedback mic in the nozzle of the IEM that measures the in situ response, which does compensate for the ear Z. I don't know that it's necessarily doing anything regarding HRTF.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I worded that badly.
My understanding was it was to try and ensure that people would get a consistent experience, or like the experience would be consistent.
I was under the impression that it was actually changing stuff. I need to try and find it, but I remember.
Oh,
was it Jude?
I just got
Someone
a good
saying
question.
that it was very difficult to measure because of how it changes depending on what rig you put it in.
Yeah, because it's compensating for the impedance of the rig itself. Yeah. So like it will measure very similarly on 711 and 5128 because it's like taking the difference in Z and compensating them both.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I got a good question from Dalar Coin. Why do you have a problem with tuning switches? I've seen you and a lot of others criticizing them, and I don't understand it. Like, I get that mids and highs should probably just be done well by the company, but adjustable bass is great, IMO. So I agree. Little switches are a failure point, which I don't love. I also, and this is not a criticism of it as a product, it's a criticism of me as a reviewer having to measure them. I hate having to measure things that have multiple nozzles and multiple tuning switches, so it's completely selfish. But they also generally don't make huge differences. Like, even if it is like a bass lift or something like that, it's generally not big enough to, I think, encompass the difference from like one type of listener to another, like someone who's like a bass neutral listener or to a bass head or something like that. I find the differences are usually quite minor. Now there are cases where that's not the case and it is a rather big change, in which case it's probably a good thing to have. But
I just hate the nozzle swapping thing.
Yeah,
they don't make any difference, or like
I'm not against them in principle. Like I think wider personalization should exist out of the box for audio products in general. It's just me as a reviewer who has to measure them. It sucks having to do that, especially since I take more measurements than most other people, and then have the changes be basically nothing.
All right. Joel Merrifield says we should be publishing excess group delay measurements with every set of headphone measurements.
I've started to.
Yeah, well, I was going to say you've always taken them. It's just that there's usually nothing to show.
Yeah.
Like I do frequency response measurements of every DAC and amp, but I don't publish them unless there's something weird.
No, I've started publishing distortion and excess group delay and impedance
Nice.
curve, all the
cool.
good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's kind of what I was saying before about like if you're gonna share data, you gotta like
Well,
lead
it's
people
the thing
through
is
what's relevant and what's not. And
yeah.
you two are both people I know that are equipped and down to lead
Yeah.
people through that.
So
So like
so the
yes,
way that I do
publish
it,
as much data as you can,
yeah,
please.
on the forum posts that I put together, I'll have like a big disclaimer being like, okay, this is the relevant data for what's perceptually useful, and then this is down here is the rest of the stuff, right? The far
Right.
less relevant stuff. So with those disclaimers in place, I think it's okay. The issue that I had with it before was like I didn't want people to read the tea leaves on something like distortion if it was inaudible, like if it wasn't going to be something they'd ever care about, because I do know that people are buying things based on imperceptible differences to begin with, and they would over focus on things like distortion when they should be focusing on things like frequency response, or even HPTF.
Yeah.
So there was a take here.
Just a very quick one, Red
Go
Goblin.
ahead.
If
Go
EQ
ahead.
was called calibration instead, there would be less resistance to it. Yes.
I don't know. I don't know
think
if he
that's
had
probably
that
right.
take on a stream before, but that take has been posted in a stream before, and it is a very good take.
It is a good take.
I was
just
going
wanted
to ask you, Cameron, do you remember what the
Hmm?
name of that company was at one of the Munich high-end shows where we went into the room and it whatever speaker setup they had, like, obliterated the room. Like, it just, like, would shake the walls and...
Bays. Audio.
Bass, yeah.
Yeah.
That was one where I, like, you would want to put a lot of effort into whatever, the demo station is, right? Like, to get that to not
Yeah.
destroy everything.
That one was interesting.
Yeah.
Blaine says we should publish excess group delay measurements for every DAC and amp. I do test that, but again, I've yet to find anything other than like the reconstruction filter being minimum phase versus linear phase where it's any different. In fact, I can't really think of any reason why that wouldn't be the case for a DAC. I mean, maybe if you did something really weird with a modulator. I can't think of anything that would actually mechanically make that happen. But
Scott Pledger says preference curves make no sense to me. Variety is the spice of life. Some days I want to drown in bass. Others I want vocals to pop. I think actually a lot of people are like that too. They don't just want the same thing over and over. I will say though, like, to me that is the thing that is solved either by EQ, like for most people, right? Like obviously there are those of us with, as Blaine calls it, the brainworms, where we'll have multiple headphones and we'll be doing all this kind of stuff. I think that's great, right? Like that's part of the hobby that can be totally fun. But if you're just a person who's like, I'm going to buy a really nice headphone, or maybe just two headphones, I think a lot of that sort of, variety is the spice of life stuff can reasonably be solved by either EQ, but also potentially functions like the X-based stuff that IFI does, or even running things off of higher output impedance sources, for example. Although I don't typically recommend that. I think that's just unnecessary. But you get what I mean, right? Like you could accomplish a lot of that with different functions, or same headphone, figure out a way to inject variety into that.
I think those the preference curves and stuff are a good way for a reviewer or a content creator to show what their kind of preference is and how something performs in relation to that. They're not necessarily saying this is correct. It's useful to have a consistent reference point. Just looking at FR with nothing to compare it to.
Oh, you need a reference point.
Yeah, exactly. So then don't look at it as this deviates from that target, therefore it's bad. It's meant to be a consistent reference point.
Although using a standard reference point like Harman makes more sense than reviewer targets.
Yes. Yeah, I do wish people would do that more. I think it would be better if people had a preference target available for people who are interested, but then would use something more standardized.
Yeah.
But it's if for some reason you're unwilling to do that, it's still better to have a reference point versus absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
There's been a good spice though, guys. Keep it coming. Send
this isn't a spicy take. It's more of just a bad take. But one wonders if a person looking at a graph on, say, Mark's database, Squiglink, could get more value out of something against his target, which is made for his rig, versus someone using the Harman target on a rig that is
And
not.
this is partially because of the KB5000 DFHRTF revelation.
Sure, but people also use, like, Ratings uses a version of Harman using their diffuse field head related transfer function for their rig, but similarly not what Harman was actually made on.
But how different is? I get what you're saying.
We don't know.
But okay, but so running with that though, we have to trust that. Okay, I have two issues with that. One is that you have to trust the reviewer a sufficient amount for that to work, that their judgments are going to be
and
good.
be familiar with their measurements and the stuff that they've measured prior.
The other is we still should never base a reference curve off of the preferences of a single individual.
Yeah, that's a good take. Again, mine was not a good take.
No, but I see why you would get there.
Yeah.
But okay, so with that in mind though, I actually think, for example, someone like VSG should make his own reference curve. I don't think it makes sense given what he's using for the ears. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, he's in a specific circumstance, and yeah, I feel like he just needs to get his HRTF measured.
Yeah, like I don't have too much issue if it's a rig like that, okay, actually, I should say, now that we know what we know about the KB5000, it kind of calls into question a lot of, like, I would be curious what Sean thinks about the HRTF.
So something that Joel and I have talked about is we don't really have, I mean, at least as far as I'm aware, I don't know when the KB5 series pinna came out.
I should know this.
If Blaine, if you know when the KB5000 pinna came out, please let us know.
Well, okay, the reason why I would be curious what Sean thinks of that is he uses it to show headphones relative to Harman.
Right. So the reason I'm asking why or when it came out is because we don't really have a timeline on when the 3K adjustment was added.
But don't we?
We just know it happened before 2018.
Yeah.
Right. So if the pinna came out,
but he
2016.
did know. Okay, but he did tell me that it was based on. Oh, are you saying?
Right, but if they moved to the KB5 pinna
Oh.
while doing the research,
but he did tell me that it was based on preference.
Right. Yeah. No. It still might be. It is still based on preference. Like, just because I trust Sean on that. But what ear they were using across the Harman research has been in flux.
Yes.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Cross came to them and said, "Hey, we have a softer pinna now. Try this. See how it goes." I wouldn't be surprised if any differences between that pinna and the old pinna led to, for example, a change at 3 kilohertz.
Blaine says this is the definition of the tea leaves. I don't know that I agree.
The definition of nerd chat. I'm not saying this happened. I'm purely wondering, because we don't know. I have no idea. It's a conspiracy theory. Yes, correct. That is exactly what it is.
I don't know. I am of the opinion that the ear gain adjustment matters, and I think that's.
Yeah, me too. I think we agree on that.
Yeah. So to try and speculate as to where that potentially comes from, I don't think is the tea leaves quite so much. I think that's a reasonable thing to try and figure out.
It's deep into nerd stuff, but
yeah, but it's a pretty big difference. Like, I think it's a difference that matters. I don't know. Like, especially if you're considering, like, just the way that the research was done, right? I don't know.
Blake.
It's not just a 2 dB change. I'm pretty sure it's a 3 dB change, is it not?
Between 2015 and 2018?
Or is it a 2 dB change?
It's 2 dB.
Okay.
Yeah, it is not
But it's not
hugely
just that,
significant,
because
but
the treble also changed. That's why it matters to me, right? Like if everything else was the same and it was just like 2 dB down, but the treble also changed.
wait, between 2015 and 2018,
Yeah, did it not?
I was not
Or
under the impression
2013
that
and
it had.
2018. 2013 and 2018.
Well, yes,
Not
because 2013 to 2015 were two different
two different. Yeah.
studies. Yeah,
Yeah.
the latter with more treble being
Yeah.
the one.
So you
with more
have a
data.
pretty. So in my view, you have a fairly reasonable change to the transition for ear gain between the upper mids and treble, between 2018 and 2013, and the 2 dB filter or whatever adjustment is part of that. So I don't know why we would omit it.
Blaine is being an absolute troll in chat right now.
Yes.
But yeah, so there's an extent to which, like, I think you and I also both agree that the discussion we're having, as much as it may matter to an individual, is
Cameron
kind of
is
tea
fascinated by
leaves.
this.
Just because, like, and this is a term you've used before, Harman is useful in that it outlines the basics of good tuning, not that it like prescribes a curve or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is kind of nerd tea leaves, conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it.
The main problem with Harman, honestly, is that people weaponize it in the wrong way. I think it comes down to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The main problem with Harman is that people don't include the 3 kilohertz, 2.8 kilohertz filter when they're trying to port it over to other measurement systems.
The main issue with Harman is that when people pull it up on Squiglink, they don't use the color blue for it.
All right. So we have our issues with Harman. We have our grievances on the table. All right, let's do a couple more spicy takes. I saw a couple other good ones. There was one from Joel that I liked.
A sufficiently large average of reviewer curves on the same rig would be good.
That, yes.
I also like that take.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have that for Delta if you ever want it, Joel. But that's just like an average Delta target. What you're talking about is like an average of all reviewer preferences, which is interesting. Maybe if like we compensated all of those targets using the Delta information and then aggregated it, it would be a little more useful.
Part of me also feels, though, that we would just get like an additional spectrum for, like, it would basically just fall within the same cluster analysis that Harman gives you. Right? That'd be interesting, but maybe
Yeah.
maybe it trends in one direction or another. It'd be kind of interesting, but
I actually think the main deviation would be that more people would have just a slight bit more low mid range. Just because most reviewers I've seen have flat lower mids versus Harman's dipped lower mids. But I think they would all still have like an HRTFE shape above that.
I haven't seen other reviewers with a flat lower mids other than Kryn.
Most of them do.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
Super Review is pretty much the main.
Oh, okay.
Deviant from that because he has upward tilted lowered mids. So
Right.
yeah.
Scott Pledge has got a take that says we should never show raw or even compensated measurements. We should only show differences, as in measurements between two different headphones. That's spicy. I disagree personally, just because it takes away any kind of single reference point. It means.
But what he's saying is you still have a reference point just with the other headphone, right?
Yeah, but you can't always get to two measurements of the headphones you're looking for from a particular source.
Well,
It
the other
means that
issue
now you have to get the same measurements from the same source. You can't compare things at all.
The other issue is that that's only useful to people who've heard that other headphone.
And yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So
Rob had a really good take before. I'm trying to find it.
I'm not supposed to be finding good takes. I'm supposed to be finding spicy takes.
yeah. And then,
Well,
and
I don't
then
think you
disagree
guys are
with-
going to agree. I don't think you guys are going to agree with the take. That's why it's good. Hold on.
Are you saying we're not good?
I'm saying this take is ridiculous, and I want to find it. I think it was pretty far back.
Give us some more spice, guys. Put some chili so we
Taryn
can see them.
Taryn has joined the chat.
Hi, Taryn.
yeah, Taryn. I'm gonna put Taryn on blast for trying to compare stuff on Gross that's been measured relative to Harman with stuff that's been measured on B&K 5.28. And
I
trying to read
found
the tea leaves.
I found Rob's take.
Okay.
Before buying headphones, it is best to first listen to the pads by themselves.
Oh yeah, I saw that one. Yeah. No, see, like my take on that
What?
is we should just listen padless. Clearly, like pads don't make a difference, so we may as well just listen padless.
That's so true.
It's a joke for anybody who's taking that out of context.
You joke, but I know someone who, for a long time, genuinely used HD800 with no pads and
Jesus.
loudly and persistently proclaimed that it was better that way.
Based. So true. Yeah. I mean, so there's like an extent to which when like the HD800 pads wear, obviously they're not as prone to pad wear changing the sound, but the thickness of the pad does change the driver distance, and I find that the upper mids do lift a bit when you have less driver distance. I think I assume that was Manuel Jenkins you were talking about. I assume that's
It
what he was getting out of it. But doing it also destroys the seal, even on a rig.
You just
So
dox him.
Really? You don't get a seal if you haven't got any pads. Damn.
who would have thought, right?
So okay, just a related question. Do you think it's okay to review headphones with non-stock pads?
No, absolutely not. No,
I
would say it's even. Well, you have to disclose it.
No, but like
At
only non-stock pads, like not having.
No.
Is it non-stock as in like, I put some Taconi pads on it?
Yeah, well,
No,
with brainwaves or
not
whatever,
that.
you know.
But if it's like ZMF where you can choose what pads come with it, then I'd say that's fine as long
But
as you
that's not-
explicitly state which ones that you're using.
Those I would still consider those stock too. Like they're stock in the
Yeah.
sense that if you choose it with the thing, right, then you'd get
Yeah.
the
Yeah, I think aftermarket is
aftermarket is
where
what
the
I mean.
line
Yeah,
gets drawn.
Yeah. No, don't review it with aftermarket pads. It's definitely good if you think that it's an improvement to say, hey, by the way, if you can fix a bunch of issues or you can make these better with some aftermarket pads, but don't.
What if it's
review
meaningfully
the
worse
headphone.
than what the stock pads have, and you judge it to be
It
terrible?
generally is. Isn't
I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest, if it's a case of like, hey guys, this headphone sucks with the stock pads, but it's actually quite nice if you use these ones, so I'm going to review it with these.
No.
and you'll-
What I'm talking about a specific example where someone said, "Oh, this headphone sucks," and it was with the non-stock
Oh,
pads.
okay, yeah, no, that's not fair. Like if you found
it's bait,
something which
it's bait.
makes an improvement,
Yeah.
then as long as you're very clear about it, then I think it's okay. But if you're, slandering a device for something which the manufacturer didn't intend at all, I think that's you can't really.
I'm gonna take a page out of Blaine's book and be even more authoritarian. I don't think people should even be allowed to give impressions of a headphone with non-stock pads unless they are so explicit at every single turn that they are not using the stock pads.
Straight to jail. Right to jail.
Right,
Seriously,
Right away.
It's pretty funny to have seen some of the stuff going on Discord specifically, where people will bash the crap out of a headphone.
Yeah.
And then be like, yeah, put ZMF pads on it because the original sucked, which is fair.
I saw someone recently who was saying that a particular planar magnetic, so and somewhat hard to drive headphone, sounded really bad, and then it turns out that they were running it directly off the outputs of their DAC. So,
How?
I don't know, not very well apparently, but that was and they didn't mention that until about 20 minutes into the conversation. But
Of course they didn't.
Yeah.
Camille says Ordovina might have sold more units padless. I don't know about that, but interestingly, the R10P sounds better with the cups off.
So
It sounds better if you force it to be an open back.
Maybe cupless is the answer.
So, who was it? I think someone took the pads off of a Sundara closed, and it looks like it would have sounded better without
the pads
the
or the
cups.
cup?
Without
the
the
cups.
cups.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Padless and cupless. Let's just listen to naked drivers. Who needs baffles?
Hot take from Joel. Cringe should be tried for crimes against the audio hobby for accidentally reinforcing misconceptions as the measurement guy. Open parentheses. Flat below 900 hertz, comma, tonal, technical, etc.
Well,
I don't think he should be tried as a criminal. But there's some misconceptions that will
So,
reinforce.
but let me see if I
certainly.
understand the take though. Is Joel saying here that the problem is that Critical has positioned himself as the measurement guy, and as an expression of that, creating this erroneous tonal technical dichotomy bit?
I think Joel is more concerned with the results as they are now, which is that these um, these ideas run rampant and have for years,
Right.
due to being, legitimized in part by
I
Crane.
I'm curious what Golden thinks about this, because Golden, I mean, we've all used Critical's language to a certain extent, right? We also kind of think of this stuff in terms of a tonal and technical dichotomy. But another way to think about this would be coarse grained and fine grained, right? Coarse grained,
Yeah.
smoother, relationship with wideband, and fine grained being like, okay, where are the minutia for me? But there's a sense in which it's easier to just do what Kryn did, and I think that's why people tend to do it, because it's easier as a function of communication, I suppose, even though it's slightly wrong. What's your sort of take on that?
That's kind of where I was going to go with it, to be honest, is that, regardless of whether you like his approach or not, Kryn does an absolutely excellent job of making the information very accessible to a very large audience.
Yeah.
And I think that has overall been a very significant positive thing for the community. I personally like when there is a closer analysis of the smaller factors, but most people aren't going to want to sit through 20 minutes of that. So I think that's I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with how Kryn does it. I think that he does a good job of being clear about where the limitations lie without, every other sentence making a disclaimer. So I don't really have any problems with it. I think that it's not the kind of approach that I personally watch, but I totally get that it is for a very significant chunk of the people watching.
Do you think that there is something else, some magical property that's not being measured, that we could refer to as technicalities that would be...
I don't think it's that we're not measuring it. I think it's just a question of interpretation.
Okay.
My view is that, bordering differences, but in terms of exactly representing how something's, HPTF, how it's going to perform on your head, and this applies to DAX and amps and stuff as well. I think that anyone who says that we cannot measure something probably isn't aware of how accurate, particularly source key measurement stuff is nowadays. And it's simply a question of there's things which I don't think we know how to interpret or directly correlate at this time. But it's not an issue of not being able to measure it. If two things are absolutely identical in every test that you can show, they are the same. If something's different, then it's sometimes a little bit more up for debate as to what subjective characteristics that might then correlate to.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're all sort of on the same page with that. But it is I sometimes feel I have to get into this. I have to play the language game in order for, the judgment about a product to gain any purchase, right? For people to understand it. And that's annoying, because it's like, I don't want to play the language game. I don't want to just talk in ways that the community has erroneously learned, it was the whole, you must unlearn what you have learned thing, right?
It's understandable to not want to contribute to it.
Yeah.
I
exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know what the solution is. So
the Truth Your Reds are a good example of something where the tuning, you can't really point to any sort of obvious issues for the most part, and a lot of people really like the tuning, but the main complaint people had with them was that it wasn't technical enough.
Right. But that
so I think over time people found faults in the tuning. The biggest complaint was actually comfort.
That's fair.
I don't know what, like, people aren't doing manual cursor based sweeps to understand where the issues are for them, if there are, right? But even if you are doing manual cursor based sweeps, that doesn't give you, particular FR relationships that would be, potentially contributive to whatever given technical quality people are, or experiential quality, let's just say, people are identifying as good or bad. So,
Blaine, why are you shouting?
yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
what Blaine
he's
is
shouting at me too in
He's
DMs.
shouting in the void. He says we cannot measure why kids love Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Hey, I made that joke last time on stream.
Ah. The biggest reason why my headphones are the best is because I bought them. That is the biggest reason why most people say their headphones are the best.
Like I think that there's some stuff with headphones and IEMs which would be. It's not that I'm saying I think that there is something there. It's that I think it's not really been explored enough, which is like as mentioned the potential for excess group delay behavior in IEMs. Axel Grell's obviously spoken about sort of acoustic impedance somewhat separate from frequency response and how that affects perception. And it's like we don't really have much consistent, also a concrete study to answer these one way or another. But it would definitely be interesting to have more information about it. I think the summary is, if something is audibly different, there is absolutely the ability to measure it. It's just that what is audibly different might not necessarily be obvious in how we usually look at things. We can't necessarily say, why is it that E-stats sound more detailed to most people? But there are consistent sort of trends across E-stats that don't then apply to most dynamic driver headphones, for example. And there's even ways to have things sound different and not show up in some of the measurements that we usually do. This is more of a source gear thing. And like, actually, if anyone's coming to CanJam New York, I'm doing a talk and talking about some of the sort of misconceptions about measurements. And actually, the collab DAC that I've got coming out, it's got a feature which quite drastically changes how things sound, but does not show any difference whatsoever in any of the tests that places like Audio Science Review would usually do.
But they are still measurable if
But
you know what to do.
Okay.
Yeah, and I show that in the talk. It's very easy to demonstrate that something is different, and if you know what you're looking for, you can find it. Not that it's not measurable; it's just that
it wouldn't be on their
be a bit
roster
more
of
thorough
tests.
than
Got it. That's cool.
We need an open source measurement utility. Like
RumiQ Wizard. Oh, it's not. It's open. It's not open source, but it's free.
Otherwise, there's no way to know the underlying calculations are actually correct.
Blaine's
open
response.
source software is bad for science.
Yeah,
I don't know. As long I just want something where I don't have to
thing.
pay an extra £1,000 a year to Audio Precision to update the software on my analyzer. That would be very nice.
Oof. Yeah, that's rough.
there are significant issues with Red's tuning. I'm going to say 4K, 10 to 12K, 300 hertz. Where else?
It's 200 hertz, 1.5K, 4K.
200. Okay, yeah. What's the issue at 1.5K?
Too much.
Too much? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the difference between 2020 and 2023.
Okay. I'm ignoring your all caps stuff.
Dude, Blaine is like scaring me. I have no idea. So they're DMing me too, and it's like, you are not making any sense. This is the sense making guy, not making sense in my DMs.
Squiglink is open source, no, and it has created a disaster. Yeah. Yeah. It's created a monster. Sorry, Mark. You've created a monster.
Well, technically it was Kryn.
Well, yeah, I know, but it's Mark's thing.
Yeah.
Scott.
He's Wittgenstein posting. Great,
What?
thanks, Blaine.
Instead of shit posting, it's Wittgenstein posting.
I don't like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he's giving. Yeah, I'm not gonna. Otherwise, we get into philosophy again. That's just how that happens.
Oh yeah, no, and Blaine's not here, so we're not doing it, right, Cameron?
I mean, I was thinking, I maybe I could do a stream of just philosophy at some point, no audio stuff whatsoever. We'll talk about. We'll talk about Frank Jackson's What Mary Didn't Know. We'll talk all about Gettier cases. We'll talk about contextualism, subject-sensitive invariantism. We'll talk.
So
we'll reference the fact that most
languages
language is just loose talk.
Okay, great. You can do that. You have the qualifications to do that. You have the equipment. I don't know if you have the time, but you should do it. Just not when I'm here, please.
I don't. The issue is I don't think everybody else has the interest or the patience.
The public perception of philosophy nerding is yeah, probably congruent with that conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. Seems a bit
Can me and
punitive. Like
Blaine
the
just do an
audience,
economics stream at some point as
the,
well?
the, the
I would
audience
love that,
did something
actually.
wrong. You know, like they're being punished for their transgressions.
Blaine says he has the interest, but he'd be trolling 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Blaine banned me from using the word Keynesianism.
As in like John Maynard Keynes.
Yes.
Ah, yes. The best thing to cite when you're putting together a paper.
Front
Okay.
fell off.
Let's do one more deep spicy take, and I need it to be a spicy one that
Give us
is
the spiciest of spice.
like
Come on, guys.
some freaking. I was gonna say ghost pepper, but that's not really that spicy anymore compared to like Carolina Reapers. Kantianism, no. Is it Keynes, not Keynes? Okay. Let's go. One more.
I hope
some
someone
spice,
else
guys,
is getting
come
more
on.
Clark and Door references, because if you haven't, that's
Sorry, what?
for anyone watching. Just go into YouTube and search "The Front Fell Off" and just watch that.
Oh yeah, the front fell off. Yeah, quite like the front fell off.
And Toad outside the environment. It's no longer in the environment.
Well, the front fell off.
And I assure you, that's very unusual. That's not normal.
So
here we go.
there are some brands that aren't gonna have much of a presence at CanJam. Are there any brands that you're upset aren't coming?
I don't know.
I haven't seen who's coming or who isn't coming. More to the point.
Honestly, I'm just being like dragged along to the CanJam. I'm not all that up on what's going on with it.
Got it.
Yeah,
I'm mostly just malding that B&K isn't going to be there again.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Oh, are you looking at Blaine's take?
Yeah,
it's interesting.
So TJ Cook says Cam needs a better track to have a hoodie from. So like, what would the track be? Imola? Silverstone seems appropriate for someone from the UK.
Silverstone's pretty good as far as it goes. Okay.
Yeah. Real Audiophiles.
One somewhere else, but
Real Audiophiles should be spending. Wait, are you a McLaren fan?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay, gotcha. Real Audiophiles should be spending money on ear geometry restructuring surgery, or just EQ.
A lot of people should do is pay to get their ears cleaned. That's something which actually can make an improvement and doesn't cost very much, and some people probably should do.
Yeah. Resolve has smiled too much this live stream, probably. So Sony. Okay, let's do it. Sony is the only big audio company that seriously tries to innovate. That's why so much of their stuff sucks. But are you talking like with form factor? I saw, what was the one that like it's like an IEM that just hangs out like on the ear lobe?
The Link Buds.
Is it the Link Buds? Let me look this up.
Maybe. I see where Blaine's coming from.
No, it's not the Link Buds. It's a new one that I saw, and I wasn't sure what brand it. I can't remember what brand it was, but I feel like it was a mainstream one, like maybe even Samsung.
And what did you say it was like? It was like a near field
hangs
ear
out,
speaker? Or?
No, so like it hangs out. It looks like an earring, right? Just like a thick earring. Seeing if someone in the chat knows what I'm talking about. Is it Bose? Yeah, it's Bose. Bose. Hold on. Bose in-ear. Yeah, they're called Ultra Open earbuds. I'm getting a ad block page for it. Ultra Open, yeah. Look that up. They look cool. I want to try them.
Yeah, Blaine was talking about the Sony Float, which I just posted in our chat.
Oh, okay.
Is this the Jacqueline float or is it different?
No, it's much different.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've seen this. My camera's
Cam,
also
your
dead,
camera
yes.
went again. Yeah.
Yeah, I only had one battery, which was half charged, so that'll have to be it for now.
Yeah, I think we're wrapping up anyway.
Yeah, we are wrapping up. I think that's basically it for the live stream since you guys ran out of spicy takes. So, that's how that's the fuel really. I mean, and I'm still suffering from jet lag. So, I've been awake since 4 a.m. and it's time for my
Scott
nap.
Pudge's saying Bluetooth still sucks from a purely user experience perspective.
I
don't think that's the case.
Bluetooth products typically suck.
Yes, Bluetooth products typically suck, but like just the process of pairing and using Bluetooth's gotten a lot better.
Yeah, camera needs bigger batteries. More desktop amplifiers need rear speaker outputs.
I disagree with that. Having speaker outputs means you need to change the entire design philosophy of the product, usually to the detriment of using it for headphones. There's a reason why headphones amps aren't just speaker amps.
Yep. All right. That's it. That's it for the live stream. Let's do one quick round of each of us saying, okay, like give a recommendation, because that's really the only reason people are here at this point. What's a recommendation? It can be product related, but it can also just be like a recommendation for life.
Instead of oh, go ahead.
No, you go. I'm thinking.
Instead of spending money on the next headphone you want, spend that money on a trip to CanJam.
Is that good
Try
advice?
some stuff out.
That's a spicy
meet some
recommendation.
Spicy? Why is that
It's spicy, but if you're gonna spend like hundreds of dollars potentially going through or reselling stuff that you don't end up liking, it's worth spending $100 or $200 to get to and go to CanJam.
That's fair.
Plus, it's
I mean, we talk about endgaming the hobby in terms of like consumer choices, like buying the thing that makes you happy. There's another kind of endgame, which is hearing everything, and then basically the state of the market. There isn't that many headphones.
The risk though is that the people get the brainworms and then they're in it.
If they're watching this, they've already got the brainworms.
You're gonna catch audiophilism.
Yeah. It is.
If they've made it through Blaine's Wittgenstein posting, they have the brainworms.
It's almost as unpleasant of an affliction as. No, I'm not going to say it. It's almost as terrible a condition as being British. I'm just kidding, Cameron. I'm just kidding.
Sorry, Cameron.
I'm very offended. I'll be submitting a complaint, and
yeah.
I think my advice would be, just because there's something new out doesn't mean that the thing you have is suddenly worse. Don't look at what you've got as a comparison to what is available. Look at how good it is by itself. You have a great system. Just because something else might be better doesn't mean that what you've got is bad. Stop worrying about it.
Good advice. And my advice is focus on products, not brands. Every brand has, well, not every brand has good products, but like brands that have good products also have bad products. And so it's just because it's from the same brand that you might like doesn't mean that it is always going to be good. There are, I think Sennheiser is my favorite example of this. The highs and lows of the audiophile experience can be had from most brands. So focus on the good products across the board. And don't buy headphones until you've tried EQ. Good advice. Okay, that's it for the live stream. Thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks to these two folks for joining me.
I am waving. You just can't see.
He's waving. Yeah. Any other shout-outs? Shout-outs to headphones.com for making all this possible, providing all the measurement equipment and the stuff to review. What else? Join a Discord. That should be linked in the description. Tam must be stopped. Okay. And on that terrible disappointment, it's time to end.
Thanks, everyone.
That might be copywritten. I don't know.
Thanks, guys.
Like, I don't know if I could say that.